Good morning, everyone. I'm Jan Carlos Kucharek, PIP editor, and welcome to today's webinar on architecture for schools and education. Now, education's been in the news recently, and not for particularly good reason. The recent suicide of a head teacher of a Berkshire school after an Ofsted report that downgraded it from outstanding to inadequate has sparked an enormous public debate into the whole system of reporting and whether a single word can truly and accurately describe the complexity of any particular educational context. While these are always accompanied by a more detailed report, the import of those single words can be symptomatic of a society that wishes to be fed simple quantitative data to allow them to make swift decisions rather than having to spend time and effort evaluating complex educational scenarios. That urge for simplification is something that architects should also resist, despite all the pressures that might drive them down the road of simplistic solutions. The agenda to push STEM subjects, driven by government policy, seems to promote empirical, data-driven and results-based approaches to education that might reduce students down to bots being processed through pedagogical spaces whose design is based on homogenization and where the only game in town is the balancing act of grades optimization with cost per square metre. But if we need reminding, education's a journey and not an end in itself. Educationalists Maria Montessori, Rudolf Steiner and Loris Malaguzzi are testimony to that. Of these, Malaguzzi's involvement with the setting up of the Reggio Emilia approach in Italy in the early 60s has seen a truly inspiring iteration of it appear in the northern suburbs of Madrid, with the new Reggio School designed by Andres Hacke's Office of Political Innovation. His amazing school, which according to one of its own pupils looks like a robot made of butter, is a sight to behold, developed through long and intense interaction with its 2 to 18-year-old users. Here, children are not treated as empty vessels to be filled with knowledge, but interpolators of the environment around them, and where the physical space is the teacher. With these givens, the building can be read through a different lens, its insulating cork walls, a surface for plants and fungi to flourish. Its windows are all seeing like bugs' eyes, its playground a forest in the centre of the building that's ripe for exploration. Now, not as alien looking perhaps, with the help of our guest speakers taking us through their projects and research today, we'll be conducting our own look at the education typology from primary to tertiary, keeping an open mind, hopefully, as to how architecture might be best employed to support the tentative, expansive nature of learning, and how that thinking might in turn embody new forms and approaches. Starting off today, we'll be speaking to Dr. Sharon Wright, Senior Associate at the Learning Crowd, and Helen Taylor, Director of Practice at Scott Brownrigg. Helen Taylor has worked in education design for more than 20 years and loves engaging young people in the built environment. She's passionate about sustainability, inclusion, health and wellbeing, and has worked with the RIBA, the Department for Education, and Schools of Architecture to drive design standards and communicate the importance of education spaces. She shares practice research via Scott Brownrigg's Design Research Unit and other DFE publications. And she's working on the DFE's Design Code for Schools and Colleges and is also a proud mum. Oh, sorry, my list has gone. Hold on a moment. Sorry about that. And Sharon Wright has spent 20 years working with education leaders, architects and contractors in the development of new learning environments nationally and globally. She's got expertise in creating the vision and design brief, engaging users in the process to make them stakeholders in design. With a background in education policy and organisational development, Sharon is a Doctor of Education from King's College London, with research interest in the history and policy context of community schools. She's a Fellow of the RSA, a UK Executive Committee member of the British American Project, a RIBA affiliate member, and on the board of Bees United, the Brentford Football Club Supporters Trust. Bit of a plug there. They're here today to discuss the co-authored book, Community Schools, Designing for Sustainability, Wellbeing and Inclusion. And I look forward to seeing the presentation. Good morning, Sharon and Helen. Helen, I understand you've had a few tech problems this morning, as I indeed seem to have had. So I hope you're both there. Are you there?
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, we're here.
please take it away.
Thank you so much, and we're absolutely delighted to be here today to talk about our latest RIBA book, which is called Community Schools: Designing for Sustainability, Wellbeing and Inclusion. And Helen and I have collaborated for many years on projects and on a previous book for RIBA on urban schools. So we really started this project, and we've been thinking about it through the pandemic when we were in lockdown and beyond. And we were thinking, what drives change? And obviously, there are a lot of things that we can't control in terms of change, particularly around education, and change is always happening in education. There's the government agenda, government of the day, curriculum funding, the idea of devolution, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland doing slightly different things. An evidence base of sorts that drives those decisions. And obviously we're coming up to an election and we're starting to think about what changes that might bring. And it's really interesting, I think, the potential impact that could have on school design. There are societal shifts, and the pandemic has really raised up the agenda, issues of wellbeing, inclusion, sustainability obviously is a massive issue we've been looking at for quite a while. Around school design, and new technology and instant communications is one that's creating a lot of debate at the minute around AI and the use of that in education. The things we didn't predict, the pandemic, the rise of global warming and the overheating of schools last summer when we hit 40 degrees in London, for example, I think was something that we hadn't expected. The war in Ukraine, the energy crisis that's draining money in school budgets and not allowing them to do other things. But the thing that we really wanted to concentrate on with the book was around bottom-up change, about empowering clients and design teams to really take control of the agenda and to start driving change, because I think that's something that hasn't been as well developed as it could have been over the last sort of 10 years. And that's about really having strong vision for what we want schools to do. It's about having the data which drives change through evidence. It's about calling for the right budgets. It's about developing the right capacity and skills within the sector. And it's about collaboration, which I think we've always been really good at, and coming together now to kind of drive change and get the schools that we want for the future. So I always start from the premise, and anyone who's heard me speak before will know that I say this all the time, is that a school isn't a building, and we shouldn't think of it as such. A school is a community of learners, and the building wraps around them and allows them to be the best they can be. So our starting point is always about understanding that community of learners and their needs in terms of what then they require for spaces. And I think the difficult thing in that conversation is that the budgets in England particularly have been focused on condition of school buildings, and rightly so. The school estate is terrible and has been underinvested in for many, many years, and we're seeing lots of headlines around schools being in quite dangerous conditions now. So I think condition is a very big issue and we must address it, but I think we need to take a holistic view of our schools and really understand the impact of really well-designed schools on our pupils, parents, staff, and the wider community. And particularly for our book, we wanted to look at those other aspects around sustainability, community, wellbeing, inclusion, and suitability. Is this building suitable, not just for delivering the curriculum of today, but in doing all the things we wanted to do for the future? And we're really interested in the connection between schools and the places in which they exist, and that connectivity, which Helen will talk about a little later. So I know we've got some Scottish colleagues on this call today, and I've been doing some work in Scotland over the last few years, and it's been really interesting because Scotland has a national strategy, a national state strategy for the schools, and has these 10 key principles around which all the conversations on school designs happen. And they are fantastic. They really allow you to develop a very exciting vision of what the school is. And so, they're not just about a fantastic learning experience. They're about delivering well-being of learners. They're about supporting inclusion and transition. They're about maximising the investment in communities that a school building can deliver. They have an emphasis on outdoor learning environments, which are really important, and we'll talk about that more, I think, as we look at the case studies and we concentrate on wellbeing. And they're about involving people within the decision-making process, the kind of whole school community. And this word collaboration comes up again. And so I think, that very big view of what a school can do, not just for its young people, but for its community, for the place in which it exists, is something I think that, we'd like to see more emphasis on. And the book very much concentrates on lessons and how we can kind of bring that into the conversations that we have. So in terms of community, I think that, we wanted to acknowledge that all schools are community schools, that I haven't yet worked with a school that doesn't say, we want to be part of our community, we want to open our facilities, we want to do things for our community. And to think not just about curriculum delivery, but the fact that schools give young people agency. They allow them to flourish and succeed. And so we should be thinking about, all aspects of young people's development when we're designing schools, not just in a narrow subject-led, exam-led building. That schools are essential infrastructure and they provide employment. There's been a real underemphasis on staff, I think, in schools. And that's something that, again, we try to bring out in the book. But they also are local employers, they support local businesses, they deliver important community spaces where they don't exist elsewhere within that community. And that schools are natural community hubs, and I think we saw this through the pandemic, particularly for those most in need. And there are some great examples around the country of schools doing fantastic things for their communities, setting up food hubs in Wales, for example, and doing great things that bring the community together, empower them and support them in ways which are really, really important. So in terms of wellbeing, I think this is a really interesting conversation. We're starting to see lots of new research coming out, lots of new conversations, which is brilliant. The more debate, conversation, challenge there is, I think, within the sector around education of what wellbeing means and how we can practically deliver spaces that support wellbeing is important. And, we would love to continue that conversation with anyone who wants to or has some information to share. And it's really risen up the agenda during the pandemic, and it's just great to see it being discussed. And I think the important thing is that this is a conversation which will continue to develop. I think we're just starting to understand what wellbeing in schools and education spaces looks like. And so we started, as you might expect, with Maslow's hierarchy of need and looked at the emerging work that's coming out around wellbeing in schools and thinking about all the spaces you need to design for, really. And the places that sort of hit all the levels of the pyramid, I think, are equally important. And this is something I think which will evolve over time. So we've been very clear that this is, something you need to build future proofing into. So there is some talk, for example, if we get a Labour government, they are going to provide an opportunity for all young people to have access to a counsellor. Now, our schools at the minute, all of them are saying to us, we are having real challenges finding enough small, more intimate spaces in our schools to deliver one-to-one and small group support. And the level of need is rising, and therefore, it's likely to rise even further. So how do we kind of create the spaces which allow those sorts of activities alongside curriculum learning? And I think, the current schedule of accommodation, anyone who's working in schools will probably know that the focus is not on those spaces. So we felt really strongly that it's, getting the basics right is important. And I think we're really good at that. I think there's been a lot of emphasis on having good, safe, calm, comfortable environments. But how do you provide spaces which engender the sense of belonging, that deliver those support functions, but create a sense of belonging, give young people agency and choice, and ultimately give them understanding of, what their own ambitions are, how they can achieve their best, and how they can be supported to do that. So I'm going to hand over to Helen to talk about some of the case studies in the book.
Thanks, Sharon. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So as Sharon said, I think what we really wanted to do with this book and to try and the message we're trying to share is about that connectivity that schools have an opportunity to have. And I think we saw, as Sharon said, through the pandemic, the vital need that schools demonstrated in their local community. But a lot of what Sharon and I really enjoy working together on is understanding what this means for the space and how we can help the schools themselves get the spaces that they need to be able to deliver some of these within sometimes quite constrained funding envelopes, spatial envelopes, and the piece of work, our previous publication, Urban Schools, was very much about how to deal with those very difficult high density situations, how you generated some of these spaces and opportunities for the schools to be able to do these things. And inclusion as well as connectivity, I mean, those two things very much go together, but trying to meet the needs of all users, particularly to provide that opportunity for everybody to flourish is absolutely key, and something that we want to build into every spatial opportunity for schools, regardless of their curriculum and regardless of their cohort. Next slide, please, Sharon. So we've woven quite a number of case studies through the book, some of which, do align more than others with the various themes, but I think you can pick up on all these themes through all the case studies. And I think something we're really keen to do is kind of test our own projects against these themes, but also to just try and show what good looks like or what it could look like. Because I think one of the things as architects that we have a great power to do, we need to remember sometimes that we have this power, is to help people visualize what this could look like and how this could work. And the collaboration that Sharon and I have had together over the years has been a really good way to make sure that the spaces that we are visualizing and creating can actually deliver these impacts. So Three Rivers Academy, this is a Scott Brownrigg project, completed a few years ago now, pre-pandemic. This is a secondary school down in Surrey. And I went back and revisited it a couple of times recently, and it was great to hear from them that some of the things we built in terms of flexibility and adaptability, or hoped we'd built in terms of that, actually did pay off during the pandemic. And this turned out to be a very, very flexible, adaptable school. But also it's a school which really thinks about connectivity and inclusion. And the young people in the school said to me that, as well as feeling very proud of being a part of this school because of the quality of the spaces, the way it looked, it really mattered to them. They were very proud of it. They really loved the sense of safety and security it gave them. They could find their way around really easily. They could find their friends really easily. They could find a teacher, importantly, really easily. And actually the fact that it was very open and transparent and very easy to find their way around made them feel very safe and secure. So that was a really nice message to hear back from the students themselves. Next slide, please, Sharon. We've also included some international case studies. So this is one that you might have seen published in quite a number of architectural journals, Melope by ex-DGA Architects. This is part of an OMA master plan in Ghent. And it's the first community facility of any kind, I think, in this particular area. So what the architects have done is create this really beautiful, dramatic, multi-story educational space. They've had a very tight site to work with. So both the internal and external spaces are stacked. But what they've been able to do is create a very visible community hub for this new development. So they're seeing this as something that is absolutely designed to welcome the community in, to the extent there is actually a public footpath that runs under the building. And it's something that they want to use as a way of a jumping off point to develop the community within this area. Next slide, please, Sharon. And you can see there, very simple arrangement of spaces, very flexible. The architecture is not restrained by the need to have a number of very simple, flexible spaces for the school to operate in. Next slide, please, Sharon. And at a very different scale and very different kind of environment, Silver Birch up in Argyll and Bute. So as Sharon said, she's been working a lot with the authorities in Scotland, and one of the things that they have really invested in is outdoor learning. And there's a really important role for designers here, obviously, in terms of creating these positive spaces for young people. And I think one of the lovely things about Silver Birch is that their vision is very much about seeing the child as a vital part of the community, and making sure that children and their families have that opportunity to experience nature, to push boundaries, to experience risk as well, which is something that is quite difficult for schools sometimes to manage. But I think this is something that young people need more and more, particularly over the last few years. I think this engagement with nature, supporting them, has a really positive impact. And these kind of spaces, I hope we'll see more of these. Sustainability is obviously absolutely fundamental and weaves throughout the book. And we're looking at sustainability as a whole, considering all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The current DFE standards are really starting to push this agenda in terms of climate change, and you can't separate energy use and carbon from all of these other drives that we need to generate for community well-being, connectivity and inclusion. So we do refer to sustainability a lot in the book, but actually we haven't created a standalone chapter, as it were, on sustainability. We've woven it through because we see it as embedded and inherent in all of these themes that are running through the book. So ultimately, what we're trying to do with this piece of work we've put together, and in terms of case studies, the more we worked on this, the more we found. So Sharon and I are really keen to hear about more examples. We want to pull together. We see this as a jumping off point, really, for conversation. We want to pull together some more examples and try and really understand what works and how we can push this. And what we really want to do is also encourage clients, not only to really think about how they are using their buildings, so actually seeing their buildings there's something that they can have a relationship with, can change, can use, can see as a resource. And I think for staff in schools, that's really important that they are given that agency, but also to have a strategy for their estate inside and out. So not stopping at the walls, looking at the outside in the grounds and beyond as well. So looking beyond the red line of the school boundary and into the local community. And I think that connectivity, these themes we're talking about, really help some of those conversations about how you connect outside the boundaries. And we've provided a whole range of indicators in the book, and it's been really interesting actually doing the research and comparing the various indicators that are used in different parts of the world, in different types of curriculums. But every school is going to have its own indicators that work for them. Every school is different. Every school has its own identity. So of course there are some things that are consistent, but I think every school can have their own measures of success. So we're trying to put this in place to help schools develop those own ideas and take that ownership of it. And lastly, we just really, really want to encourage everybody to measure and to report and share. And I think we're getting better at that as an industry and as a sector. But I think the more we can share these, surely the better we're going to get at them. So thank you for that. That's a very quick run through. I think the book's available for pre-order at the moment, and do get in touch with Sharon and I if you have any questions, comments, and hopefully there'll be some good questions coming out of this session now. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sharon and Helen. I was kind of intrigued. I think I would have kind of like to see more examples, and I'm interested in actually going through the book in order to see the examples you've picked. I'm intrigued really about you took the Three Rivers Academy, Melopay and Silver Birch. I'm just interested in the idea that you talk about students experiencing risk, and I'm just wondering how far you think that desire to kind of experience risk kind of goes through the process of actually designing schools. Because my feeling is that for whatever reason, it seems to be that the European models seem to be slightly more experimental than us in the UK, and half of it I put it down to larger schools, maybe us being lower density generally, having more space and therefore not needing to be as imaginative with the way that we approach it, or making spaces work harder. My experience of kind of urban schools in, say, Madrid or Paris seems to suggest that they're more embedded within kind of local communities, and therefore those spaces need to work harder, whereas in the UK we're lower density and therefore you get more of a campus and therefore you don't really need to make spaces work as hard. And I just wonder whether that kind of, in a sense, means that us in the UK are somewhat less challenged or less forced to kind of take risks over how spaces work.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer first. I'm sure Sharon would have a lot to say about that as well. I mean, I think there is a fundamental cultural issue that we have, and it's very evident again when we were doing our research and putting together our book on urban schools, that there is a very different cultural approach in different parts of the world, and that impacts our spaces. You know, it's the classic, you know, you build the space and then it impacts you straight away. And I think what we've seen is not only a different approach to risk, expectations. So in Denmark, not only do they have a policy, that means they have to share education spaces with anybody. So they have somebody in place whose job it is to make sure that happens. But also, you know, you don't see fences and boundaries on schools. They're open. The children are encouraged to have confidence to call out if they feel unsafe, if anything's happening. And they challenge us and say, well, you know, having fences and boundaries on your schools doesn't stop bad things happening, does it? It's a cultural thing. So I think, unfortunately, in this country particularly, we do seem, and you know, I think it varies in which region of the country you're in, even at this point in time. But I think a lot of schools are very nervous about that issue of risk because of liability, and that unfortunately that's where boundaries sometimes get drawn. It's not to do with curriculum, it's not to do with what the teachers want to do, it's to do with liability and responsibility and our attitude to that as parents, as society, all of those kind of things. You know, that impacts the spaces and the facilities. I don't know, Sharon, I'm sure you can add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think safeguarding is important, but we can use it as an excuse as well to keep people out. And I think there's some really interesting examples in Scotland, for example, where adults are learning alongside children, older people are coming in to do community activities, and the spaces are designed for that to happen and they're managed for that to happen. And I think if that's well planned, well thought through, there's no reason why it can't, you know, different activities can't exist in the same building. And I think there's real benefits of it as well, in that young people are, you know, really interested in things like intergenerational learning. They've told me they want their parents to come into schools to see what they're doing. So that kind of opening up schools has benefits, I think, both for the community and for the young people who are learning within them.
There's been those great examples of nurseries and old people's homes being co-located, which I just think is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think that I think we're more prepared to take risk in a sense at kind of primary school level. Interesting. I mean, the whole kind of forest schools things. I'm just thinking about Sarah Wrigglesworth's forest schools as well, and how it seems that with younger kids, we seem to be, you know, we're open to those ideas, but the more down the road you go, the more the safer those options become in a way. And I think that's kind of, I mean, what secondary school, for instance, inspires you? As you know, what have you seen in your research that makes you think, yeah, that's a school that really works? It's both on, you know, it's treading edges of risk in a way, but also an environment that we feel is nurturing. I'm interested in what, you know, stuff that's inspired you.
I think again, it depends on the top down, you know, in a way. It's about an exam driven secondary school model that we have, particularly in England, which, you know, means that we are still building, so it's Purcells and Bells, you know, it's classrooms, labs, corridors, because it's driven by the need for young people to have that knowledge to pass exams. And I think that's a shame. I think there are many schools, though, that, you know, are trying to do more interesting things with their young people as well. And that, but a lot of that is around extracurricular stuff and enrichment, and about having the space to do that. But, you know, I hope we'll see some changes to that in the
definitely
future.
And I think I would really struggle to pick one school building that inspires me. There's kind of bits of lots of things, but I think what you mentioned earlier, Carlos, of the Reggio Emilia schools, that was really the first kind of real inspiration I had. And I think their philosophy of, you know, the child being competent.
Yeah.
And, it's not that kind of empty vessel that needs filling. They've got that inherently. They've got that ability inherently. You are there as adults and teachers to guide them and help them. And the idea that the building is the third teacher, I just love. It's, such a really simple and effective idea. And once you've got that kind of philosophy in your head, you can apply that in, so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think even in the basic, in previous education PIP webinars, I've kind of mentioned the schools of Hermann Hertzberg, and I was always struck by those because effectively they just do very, very pragmatic things that, with just how light comes into a building, or how you might use a common space and just build in furniture so that children can kind of move it around themselves and kind of create their own spaces and take ownership in the sense of the spaces there. So it doesn't need to be massive things, does it? In terms of design, you can do small things that actually have real effects on how children engage with their spaces.
Absolutely.
I was just one last thing, actually. It was about sustainability. I mean, I was struck recently, not because I thought it was a particularly radical looking school, but I thought it kind of embedded ideas of sustainability so into the building itself. Was Archetypes, the secondary school they've done down in South London, the first passive house secondary school. And I just wondered whether you feel that we need to kind of be more right that element of sustainability larger in a sense, because I think we can all talk about is sustainability embedded, and one would like to think it is, but then sometimes you have to come along to a school like Archetypes efforts and think, well, that's actually where they're really writing it large, and do we need to maybe try to push that a bit more?
I think it's interesting that the Department for Education has done quite a lot of work recently around their Gen Zero model. And that, for me, as an educationalist, is really interesting because that is much more emphasis on linking inside and outside and biophilic design. And, I think when you do those things, people see the benefit, and particularly young people, they're very interested in sustainability, and they can see the benefits to them of having a better environment and the reasons around it as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a lot more focus and a lot more is built into the current DFE framework specifications, but obviously it's going to take some time for that to actually come through and turn into delivered buildings. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of the time it does come down to procurement and how the buildings are procured, and the again, the agency that we have then as designers to make a difference and have impacts, because we've got the ability to do it. Is the archetype example is a really interesting one. I think it's just having that opportunity to be able to demonstrate it is sometimes constrained by other factors.
Yeah. Well, I hope that between the two of you, that you can actually try and help inform DFE policy to help us, take more risks effectively. As you say, it's a procurement issue. So if you can kind of push through that particular obstacle, I think that actually, that there is great potential there. I don't think it's that people don't have a will. I certainly don't think UK architects don't have a will. It's about the methodologies they need to or the hoops they need to go through in order to achieve realise the experimentation, I suppose, that they want to see in kind of future education design.
Yeah. Definitely, and there are a lot more good examples than we were able to squeeze into the book. So I really hope this will provide an opportunity to kind of gather and build on those great good practice examples.
Well, we look forward to reading them in the book, which all the listeners out there can actually get hold of from the RIBA bookshop. I think you'll get a discount as well if you put in PIP 20 when you're ordering Community Schools Design for Sustainability, Wellbeing and Inclusion. I believe you get 20% discount, which is fantastic. Sharon, Helen, thank you very much indeed for your book and for your input today. It's been great talking to you. And
thank you.
Good luck with the research. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. We now will move on to our first sponsor presentation, which is Ben Hancock, who, if you've been watching PIP webinars for any length of time, you will have seen him a couple of times. Hello, Ben, Managing Director of Oscar Acoustics.
Hi, Carlos, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. With a design background, an eye for detail and extensive product knowledge, Ben has assisted architects and contractors to bring concepts and designs to fruition while building lasting relationships. Past education projects include Oxford University's Blavatnik School of Government, University of East Anglia, Notting Hill Prep School, Hampton Court Palace, and work at the Tate's, Modern Britain and St Ives. Ben, I remember your kind of slightly foamy, popcorn-looking acoustic stuff that you put all over the walls at the Blavatnik, which would have gone down marvellously well in a Reggio school, I'm sure. But I think you're here to talk to us something about BB93.
I can mention that if you like.
Mention it now. Yeah, no, please go ahead.
Sure. Okay, can you see my presentation? Okay.
Hold on a moment. Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Good stuff. Right. So, I'm Ben Hancock. So, Managing Director of Oscar Acoustics, and we are Great Britain's #1 spray applied acoustic finishes specialist. We actually created the industry about 25 years ago now. So I'm going to be discussing the role sound plays in education, and how our range of environmentally friendly recycled acoustic sprays can play their part in improving the health and learning of students. So acoustic concerns often surround venues such as cinemas, concert halls, or recording studios. However, when it comes to learning environments, the detrimental effect of excessive noise on both academic performance and teachers' health is often an afterthought. The World Health Organization, WHO, recommends maximum noise levels of 35 decibels for good teaching and learning conditions in schools. Unfortunately, this is often exceeded, though. It found the average classroom noise level to be 65 decibels. Acoustic discomfort can disrupt the learning process by breaking down important student-teacher communication. It's a situation that needs to be remedied fast. Put simply, sound quality matters because pupils must hear their teachers in order to learn. When classrooms are too reverberant, pupils find it hard to concentrate and understand their teachers. This inhibits the learning process from the outset. Excessive noise levels are often a consequence of sound reflecting off hard interior surfaces. This particularly impacts younger children who need optimal conditions for hearing and comprehension, as their listening skills are not as developed. A great example I like to use is a restaurant. This restaurant, like many classrooms, is packed with hard surfaces and could have a reverberation time of 3 seconds plus. So you're at a table, you're chatting to your friends, and you say the word cat, for instance. The word would bounce around the room for 3 seconds until it decayed by 60 decibels. Within that 3 seconds, you continue talking and you say between 7 to 10 more words. Now, all those words are bouncing around the room, becoming tangled and hitting you from all angles, which makes it hard for you to understand what's being said. And this is happening on multiple tables, creating a sonic battleground. So what do? You talk louder. This, of course, increases the volume within the space and makes it even harder to understand. The restaurant's now getting busier, and the issue is getting worse. People are leaning in towards the centre of the table to understand their friends. The alcohol is now kicking in, not in a school, granted, but the place is now getting crazy. Nobody's noticed that there's music playing, but this all along has been adding to the problem. In the taxi on the way home, some people are leaving a review on TripAdvisor about the noise levels, and 25%, according to research, will never return, meaning the restaurant is constantly having to attract new customers to stay in business. And here's the point. You choose not to return as the experience was unpleasant and carried a level of stress you were unprepared to pay for again. But if you're a child, what do? If as a teacher, this is your workplace, what do? With financial pressures and a family to feed, it's not always that easy to go and find another job. Okay, restaurants are an extreme case, but it demonstrates the point perfectly. High noise levels of poor quality sound are stressful and make people unhappy. Sometimes they don't even realise why they feel like this. They just dread going to work. A pupil or teacher like this is not productive and can even become toxic. Now, what most people don't realise is that prolonged high noise levels can actually cause serious non-hearing related health problems. Here's a slide that I'm sure you'd recognise if ever you've seen one of my presentations. Noise pollution is a serious problem. The Chief Medical Officer in England, pre-COVID, said it is second only to air pollution in damaging public health, while the World Health Organization, WHO, highlights issues such as tinnitus, sleep disturbance, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, adverse birth outcomes, and cognitive impairment in children. Is it any wonder that 44% of teachers in England plan to quit within 5 years? Anik Hussain, a teacher in Nottinghamshire, said, "Every Monday I teach lessons in a large room with only hard surfaces and hard furniture. The echoes are a nightmare and I can rarely get my voice heard. I always leave school that day with a major headache." This exemplifies how classroom noise can ruin a lesson even before taking teacher ability, external sounds, or student behaviour into account. But is it any wonder that pupil attention is being negatively affected, resulting in poor behaviour? One study found, on average, speech intelligibility in just the fourth row of a classroom is a mere 50%. If students can only hear half of what the teacher's saying, how can they be expected to learn and retain information? If they can't hear what's being said, it's a long time to sit without getting bored, resulting in increased unruliness. With school class sizes rising, it's likely this problem's only going to get worse. The role of acoustics in architecture is not just about achieving optimum levels of sound. With the right acoustic solutions in place, it can actually enhance the way people interact with each other and the space around them. I'll give you a great example. After spraying a multi-purpose school, sports and dining hall, with our Sonar Spray product, the head teacher, delighted with the result, reported that they'd actually been throwing away less food. It seems the hall was such an unpleasant place to be, the kids were leaving food to go and play. The introduction of Sonar Spray gave them a relaxing, comfortable place to interact with their friends whilst eating. This in turn had an impact on their social development and gave them the energy levels required for concentration. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Sonar Spray range, here's a brief summary and some pretty pictures. So K13, it's the most economical finish we do. It's the coarsest finish we do. It's quite an industrial looking finish. It's in light grey on the upper walls just here. And here's K13 in grey at the award-winning Notting Hill Prep School. And through the corridors as well, some of the classrooms as well, it really looked great. K13 Special, this is the next finished up and it's milled for longer, so it's a finer finish. It's here in white on the straight onto the roof deck at Central Sussex College. And we did the lower half of the hall in our acoustic blocks as well, which gave a really impressive reverberation time of 1.23 seconds, which almost felt like a living room. It was incredible. Here it is applied directly onto concrete with deliberate shadow gaps and created in stop bead and in black here on the ceiling, but you don't really see it with the lighting facing down. Sonar Spray FC, it's finer still and the finest non-troweled finish we do. As a result, it's still extremely fast to install. And Carlos mentioned the Blavatnik School of Government. Here it is applied in rings all the way up in white. And it just follows the lines of whatever's underneath it. So they'd actually tried to do this in acoustic panels originally, and they gave up after 3 because every single panel was a completely different size, shape, and trying to get it to go around a corner was impossible. And in the teaching spaces as well, and then in black in their lecture theatre as well. Sonar Spray FCX, this is sprayed and troweled to give a flat but pitted surface. So you can see it on these amazing pods at Hope Academy, and they were sprayed in Wilmot Dixon yellow. I believe it was a design and build project, which is probably not surprising. So we sell a huge amount of this because it appears very similar in most situations to acoustic plaster, with the advantage of being a fraction of the time to install and therefore reduce cost as well. So a huge advantage of it as well is that it can be applied onto, pretty much any surface in any shape. So it just takes the shape of whatever's underneath. So it's a lot easier to create this out of the FCX than acoustic plasters with their rigid backboards. So Oscar Elite, this is the smoothest acoustic finish we do and actually on the market. And it appears the same as roller painted plaster. So here it is applied in the lecture theatre at Morton College, Oxford, and then also Oxford New College, that's far from new. I think those floorboards are 500 years old. So the advantage we have over other acoustic plasters is that we're able to sand the final coat. Others that have unforgiving resin-bound finishes are limited to what you're able to achieve with the trowel. This can make shapes extremely tricky. You can't see, but this is actually domed, this ceiling. The emissions of the products used in a build are also becoming increasingly important, with more certification systems dedicating entire sections to it. Our products are M1 classified as low building materials. They're compliant with the California Department of Public Health. They're Green Guard Gold certified for indoor air quality, also BREEAM's rating. They have EPDs and they contribute up to 17 points towards LEED as well. Our well-being also depends heavily on the survival of our planet. So environmental qualities are just as important. Our finishes are made from high-grade recycled paper and renewable plant-based fibres with specialist water-based adhesives treated to achieve Class O fire rating. The range also contributes towards LEED, BREEAM, SCAR, Living Building Challenge and Passive House. All installations are carried out by our fully trained in-house teams to complete the environmental jigsaw. Oscar Acoustics are ISO 14001 certified. We're also now committed to becoming carbon negative for our entire operation and are being independently assessed by Positive Planet. Sound Spray K13 was used at the Enterprise Centre at the University of East Anglia. This was an archetype project. It was designed and delivered to achieve Passive House standard and BREEAM outstanding rating. The outside was actually thatched as well, which really did look cool. The project won multiple awards, including RIBA East Regional, RIBA Sustainable Project of the Year, and also Best Education Project at the BREEAM Awards. Sound Spray K13 was used throughout the building, contributing maximum BREEAM points whilst giving a finish that complemented the building really well. Fergus Rolfe, who's the team manager at the Enterprise Centre, this is a lovely quote. He said, everyone loves the finish. Second to the exterior thatch, it's the most asked about and photographed material in the building. During our regular tours, people are always asking what it is and what it's for. They love the fact that it has a purpose and it's on show so they can see how the building works. So how well do the acoustic sprays work? I walked into this school and it was the room you're seeing now wasn't sprayed, but it was identical to the next room we're about to go into, which was 70% sprayed. So I turned up on site. It was a very relaxed site, as you can see. But the sound difference between the two rooms was so extreme, I had to take this really unprofessional looking video on my mobile phone. So hopefully this will... So then going through to the room, this has been 70% sprayed. Huge difference. Now, that slight twang you can hear is actually from the 30% down here that hasn't been sprayed. So it's a massive, massive difference. So due to the popularity of the product, we've hugely outgrown our current premises and are currently building a new 16,000 square foot Oscar Innovation Centre. This comprises of a large warehouse and product development facility cloaked by a brick facade hiding the warehouse from the road and the houses opposite. So I'm not going to go into any detail on this today, as I'm going to save it for a whole other presentation on completion. But what it does enable us to do, though, is A, meet our rapid expansion needs, and B, create a brand new show home for all our products. So once built, probably around the end of the year, we'd love to invite anyone to drop by for a coffee and see all the products in situ. So that's me done. Please do follow us on our social media channels and find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm Ben Hancock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. I think that's the first presentation I've ever seen where you managed to squeeze a kitten into a professional presentation about a product.
It's just cute cats win every time, don't they?
Well done. Certainly won me over. Yes, I've got a question from Bob Eden, who's asking, are there any problems? You did actually cover this, I think, but are there any problems associated with textured surfaces and cleaning regimes, health concerns? I think you remember, I think I asked you that one about the Blavatnik, and you said what you really want to do is kind of keep it out of arm's reach.
Yes. So if you keep it above head height, if you're putting it on walls, that's ideal. Actually, most of the time, the ceiling's the best place to put it. It's up there, it's out of the way. It's not going to get dusty unless you're blowing, dirty air across it. So yeah, works really well, looks after itself.
And ABW Architects are asking, can any of these finishes be painted?
Yes, so you can actually order them in whatever colour you like. They're all available in bespoke colours. Some of the coarser finishes have got minimum order runs, but actually when you're doing a school, they're normally quite sizable and well within that. You can paint it. If you're going to paint it, it's best to spray paint it, but spray with a very, very fine mist jet from a distance where, as you're spraying, the beads are settling on the surface and almost drying as they touch the surface. So what you're trying to do is create many, many layers of beads so the sound can travel around them. If you were to go in and try and spray it in one coat, what you're going to do is create a barrier, like an eggshell over the surface, and that's going to prevent the higher frequency sound and mid-frequency from passing through it and into the product, so you will reduce the performance. So there's a way of doing it, yes, but bespoke colours are the way if you can.
I was intrigued really by that comment you said where there was this kind of evidential link that there was increased food consumption that was happening as a result of better sound. And I also really like the comment where you mentioned that students were actually asking what the material was, and when they found out what it was, they were more intrigued about it. That the idea that there was this kind of physical expression of the material on the surface of the building itself, that it had a purpose. And I just wondered whether, all of that kind of feeds into that idea, I suppose that bigger idea really, that education spaces need to be somewhere where the building itself is, in a sense, an experiment, where children are kind of learning or piecing together how their environment is and why it's put together the way it is. And that sort of questioning is what kind of allows children to kind of develop their own ideas about the spaces they might want to occupy in the future, whatever. So I quite like both those points. But I just wondered, just to finish off, the idea that obviously there's always been that drive, or there certainly was in the last 20 years, to kind of increase the social nature of schools, so the larger spaces, more communal spaces. But that, in a sense, is antithetical to the idea that, in reality, I suppose, you want really small spaces with very minimal kind of acoustic problems so that kids can actually hear what teachers are saying. I just wondered if you'd seen evidence, or what your experience was of going into schools where do you think it works best? Do you see large kind of open plan schools working better than, or do you just think schools should have small classrooms?
Well, if a room has got a problem with the acoustics, how many times do you go on a Zoom call with somebody and they're in a small meeting room and the buzz, the reverb in that room is terrible. So small rooms can have the problem as well. So really, for a large room, we can, you treat it with one of our finishes, and it really makes no difference. If you've got open plan classrooms with no barriers between them, that can be slightly more difficult, and you need to increase the material depth. So a great example of that was the Glasgow School of Art. We sprayed the entire building, but as a value engineering exercise, I believe, the specified material depth was reduced by half all the way through the building. And actually whilst the acoustics were far better than a concrete building should have been, they had open plan classrooms on different levels on balconies, and there were some reports of sound problems on it. So, you do have to be careful, but with the right, if you specify the correct material depth and the correct areas, then it's no problem at all. I mean, we had 4 classes learning in one space in a school in London. They were really struggling. They had bookcases between, but with big high ceilings over the top. So it was almost impossible. And then we went in, we sprayed about 30 millimeters of the spray on there to give them Class A absorption. And the difference was incredible. And they carried on with 4 classrooms in the same hall, if you like. It was amazing.
Oh, I thought that it would be chaotic otherwise, but obviously you managed the acoustics there. Thank you very much indeed, Ben. I'm sorry I'm being nudged to move on.
No, that's fine.
Thank you very much indeed. We're now moving on to our next case study, which is Hackney New Primary School and 333 Kingsland Road. This was obviously, I think it was last year, nominated for the Sterling. Noel Cash, Associate Director, will be speaking on it. Noel graduated from Dublin School of Architecture in 2006, joining Henley Halebrow in 2007, and is working on a range of educational, leisure and healthcare projects. He's currently working on large mixed-scale residential-led social housing schemes in a number of London boroughs, forming part of large urban estate regenerations and incorporating passive house. He's a member of Hackney, Harrow and Greenwich Design Review panels, and has also been teaching at Kingston University. Good morning, Noel. Are you there?
Good morning, Carlos.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. Now you're talking to us about Hackney New Primary School, which from remembrance has got all your access corridors and everything are all part of, in a sense, an extension of the playground. That's what I was hearing.
That's right. There are no corridors that the pupils, kids experience at all, and I'll explain that as we go. So it's quite a tricky one to explain in 15 minutes, but I'll give it a go, and obviously can ask questions at the end, things I might have flew past. But this school is an urban school on Kingsland Road in just Hackney. And it comprises, it's actually a hybrid project of a residential building and a primary school, 350 pupil primary school and 68 apartments. And this is the form. So hopefully everyone can see that. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So the location is here on the old A10, which is a really busy old Roman road, actually, from London Bridge to King's Lynn. And we're located on a very busy junction in an urban environment in Hackney. We're also on the edge of a conservation area. So just give you a quick idea to context. This is our site down the very centre corner. And it was a former fire station site. This is the original fire station, late 19th century. And this was the fire station which we inherited, which was replaced, sold off for a very premium price, and hence we needed to build a residential building to fund for the school to be able to inhabit here. So this is the original site, single-story fire station, drill tower on this important junction, busy area, and this is the new, at the time, Haggerston Overground Railway. And a little bit of context, the model on the right-hand side of this is the secondary school we had completed from 2013 to 2015, which informed why we had a primary school. So we had converted an old disused telephone exchange and built a new 700 pupil secondary school opposite. That's these three buildings here around an existing building, last site, a warehouse site on the canal. And we built a new arts building and a new teaching block on the canal. And that secondary school, the founding governors wanted to build a primary school. And when this site became available opposite, they tried to bid for it. But of course, it was a very expensive site. And so in order to fund the primary school, a sister feeder school for the secondary school, they needed to form a joint venture with a local landowner, the DFE, and a housing developer. So the secondary school, give you an idea of a kind of 6-story, taller, urban, denser kind of school environments around a ball court and an existing building, which we connected via bridges to maximize more amenity space in these very limited urban sites. So moving back to the primary school, comprises, as I say, of a point block tower which fronts onto the busier Kingsland Road to protect from the fumes and noise, and a courtyard school sitting behind it in a more protected environment. Simple principles of the site were to minimize the footprint of the residential building, push it to the edge of Kingsland Road here on the left, and push the boundaries of the primary school to the edges of the site to create the maximum kind of a courtyard, basically in the center of the site, a quieter space, and connect across the secondary school in terms of on the quieter Downham Road. And there is also a commercial space fronting onto Kingsland Road. So very simple principles. But of course, the challenges of this urban site, needing a large residential building to fund it and pay for the site and to maximize amenity space. So we always had this early sketch of the residential building being this tall civic element, recognizing the position of the school and forming an entrance towards the school, and the school obviously being a lower building stepping down in the conservation area, and this idea of a hall onto the street, clear story windows. This is one of the first sketches of how we might put together these two disparate brief parts. And ideas early on from the previous secondary school, this idea of the silhouette of the masonry, of buttresses, of arcades, of bringing people into the school, but obviously forming part of the city, an urban solid kind of piece in the conservation area. So this is the finished residential building, which you see is quite a large building, comprises 68 flats fronting onto Kingsland Road, the commercial space below, and the school sits down behind it. This is the secondary school in the foreground on the left. And the planimetric of the two buildings together, you can see a large residential building with the courtyard school, which wraps around and underneath the residential building on 2 floors, providing the fourth side to that courtyard, and the entrance then on the quieter Downham Road between the 2 volumes. So just to talk more about the school itself, the design of the school, here you can see the ground floor has the school's reception, bike storage, all of those things. And you can see the colonnade, which provides shelter for those arriving from public transport, and shade, as well as a more public gesture on the street. Enter in between the 2 volumes, you see the courtyard, and now you can start to see these outdoor decks, which, as Carlos already alluded to, the courtyard school is formed around the courtyard with external circulation. So the only actual corridor is this, if you can see my arrow, is the back of house to storage and facilities for staff only. But so the entrance here from Downham Road, you can see this wedged space enters into a larger courtyard, and around that there is a covered deck. The hall sits close to the street, which can be used on weekends for community space activities, as well as the courtyard itself. The school was finished in 2019, and halfway through its first term, we had COVID, and so it's re-emerging more as a community building now. But classrooms, reception on the ground floor. Classrooms are paired, loos in the corners, they're easily accessible and very visible around the central hall, and the kitchen has its own serving space on the street. Double height hall, and then classrooms rotate within the tower. There's 4 classrooms here. All classrooms are dual aspect with connections to the city, and classrooms along the back wing are top lit down the back on the party wall between, which we'll see in the section a bit later. Library on the end of the space for kids, top lit again, double height hall, staff room, But all classrooms have an aspect towards the courtyard where everyone can see each other and very visible, and also a city view outwards as their dual aspect. And as the school emerges towards the top, it is a 3-story element on the street, 2-story at the back. We have larger music Perry rooms in the corners, again, dual aspect. And finally, on the upper floor has an allotment roof garden, kind of sensory garden space, which there's been various permutations, quite flexible in terms of the curriculum as it changes. On the top level, solid edge to it, which we'll see in the photographs in a second. So this, courtyard school around with the residential building on the right-hand side. So this is the entrance off Downham Road, slightly less busier, where you can see protective entrance, the arcade colonnade leads from the right-hand side, and a public bench on the left. And we collaborated with, at this moment of transition for kids from the outside to the busy urban city to the inside, we collaborated with artist Paul Morrison to come up with a scene of his choosing to create that kind of transition from the outside space to the inside. So on the left, you can see this quite the solid perception of the gate. So it's protective, safe, secure, not overlooked into a school at city level. And from the inside, you can see the kind of light that more in tune with Paul's monotone artistry. And then from the inside looking out, kids are very well aware of what's on the outside street, but feeling protected inside. And this kind of animation of kind of an Alice in Wonderland moment from the outside to the inside. And all stairs and circulation space are also external. They're covered with external light from above here. And this kind of what we call the residual apse off of the hall, bringing light from above. And these spaces are not just transition spaces between the outside and the inside kind of thresholds. They're fully utilized once the school gates are closed. 8:30, kids use these spaces as smaller breakout spaces from the larger courtyard, so in smaller groups. And even between columns, you can see they inhabit every last inch of, the challenge being, maximizing all sorts of amenity space. So then looking back as you progress, school kind of occurs in a kind of episodic manner from the street to this entrance court, and then beyond you can see the courtyard, which is a very different character of a lighter glazed kind of off light cream ivory brick, different patterns and a more muted color, reflecting more light, but also letting the children animate that space. And there you can see the covered external spaces at ground and first floor level, and the connection up to the roof garden in the background. And so I'll give you an idea of that kind of different character, different space inside. The staircases are covered external. Kids are refreshed from classroom, moving to the halls and various other activities, and a kind of nod to the fire station in some way in the expression of these buildings and the canopies. So talking about how the school works, you can see in this cutaway section, we have the large hall on the street, as mentioned, the roof garden above, classrooms, and you can start to see the profiles of those spaces. But the school building is sustainable, it's economic. By removing all of those internal corridors, we were able to reuse that area and again, 4 additional music classrooms. I did mention that the pedagogy at the school was this focus on music and more one-to-one learning, have slightly smaller class sizes of 25, who are taught in pairs. But here you can see the clear-story hall, naturally ventilated from the courtyard side at top level here, and actually that hall is ventilated through the school roof. Classrooms on above that, again dual aspect, and those that can't be dual aspect, the reception class here are top lit at the back, where and openable roof lights or north lights to prevent overheating. So key features of the classrooms and the kind of nature of the kind of well-being of those environments are the dual aspect, north lights. They have shading devices, canopies to prevent overheating in the summer, and warm, comfortable temperatures in winter, augmented by MVHRs for those on these 4 classrooms here in noisier streets. But one of the remarkable pieces, the external canopies and shading devices allowed this school, at 40 degrees last summer, one of the few schools left in London that remained open, and the teachers and head teachers described it as a calm and cool environment. So whilst there's investment in heavier masonry and concrete carbon structures, we feel this is a long-term investment, very low maintenance, very low technology, but performing really well for in mitigating climate change. So here you can see that environment, the shading, canopies. They also serve to prevent overlooking, of course, in the residential building above us. And then breaking that down into classroom by classroom, just to talk a little bit about the composition of each classroom. You can see this large picture window, which is the bench set into a wall, flush window on the right, which is an internal bench on the inside. You have the door and stable doors for teachers to welcome parents in and out of the courtyard without little people escaping, but also, of course, additional fresh air when needed. And that composition is fully inhabited, that wall, and they become literally shop fronts for kids, both inside and out. And so there's these other spaces outside of the depth of outside the courtyard. And the detail of that relies on this kind of almost a meter thick wall, where you can see the bench integrated from the outside. The heating elements on the inside is fully integrated. And then you can see the overhanging canopies, both for shade, shelter, and rain. Shade and shelter. And up close, you can see that detail. Exposed elements, so kids can explore and learn from how things are constructed, but it's very elementally put together, a bit like railway buildings, back-to-back angles, and so forth, and generous walkways where kids can line up or can walk past comfortably amongst each other. Internally, that environment, that translates. So you can see the large window integrated in the center with the heating elements built into the fabric of the wall. In the flush window to the outside is now a deep bench, the inside, and the doors on the left. Acoustic materials between the structure and exposed. This is a cross-laminated timber structure for the pitched roof elements. Most of the other walls are flat roofs to provide as much additional amenity space as possible. Here, where we're related to the neighbouring courtyard, we have a pitched roof and providing natural lit from the top. And you can see all these elements coming together. Exposed structure, exposed concrete elements providing thermal mass. This is an example of a music classroom. The back wall is a full acoustic wall. The concrete here is painted to provide a different character of atmosphere to the non kind of general teaching spaces. Again, exposed concrete, thermal mass, and larger special rooms for that music element. This is the roof lights on the SEN rooms. And then this is the roof garden element as you arrive up to the top level of the school with the residential building in the background. The balconies of all the residential buildings are turned away from the courtyard to the best view, southwest, but also away from the courtyard itself. And the maturity of this allotment garden has grown. So you can see maximizing every space. The hall opens up, folds back into the walls of the courtyard facade, so kids can use that as an additional play space, extension of the courtyard below. You can see how oblique then the residential building is in the background on the left, away from the school. The hall itself, clear story lit on all sides. And you can see the patterns, the kind of diaphragm wall patterns to create better acoustics, more panels in the roof, again, exposed structure for that thermal mass and prevent overheating. Shading, you can see the canopy over the stairs in the background, which also prevents overlooking from the residential building into the hall. And that space is shown here for music performances as well as assembly, many things. And the kitchens and all of these things can fold away and become as animated or as benign as depending on the different activities, as it works very hard. And then that hall to the outside, its relationship back to the community. You can see this bench along the kind of skirting almost of the building. Planners obviously wanted lots of visibility and light and animation at street level, but obviously looking into a school creates a different sense of need and security. But so we created this public kind of very simple moment on the street, a bit like a chapter house, and these kind of almost mini seats along the edge of the street, integrated into the fabric of the building, shading, seats. And here it is in action at pickup time. In the sunshine, you have the option of sitting down, meeting. Thought it very important for adults to have a place to sit and meet and talk to each other and make friends as their kids do inside. There's the detail of that and how people wait and just enjoy this a very thin extra bit of threshold to give back to the street in a civic way, whilst the rest of the building has this, robust, long-term kind of civic qualities, belonging in a very, harsh urban environment, but that can take it and need very little, if any, maintenance, but also providing a very important gesture and entrance to a school. And this is the counterpoint to the bench in the good weather, to have a place for when wet and waiting. And so this is the building in context. You can see the school sitting behind it, quite a large bit, but to show that, I guess, we really feel these things can work in harmony, particularly in an urban environment, this hybrid development, where we feel in that joint venture that, the school really got a really good fit out, really good quality spaces. Maximizing amenity is the challenge, and relying on other spaces, of course, in the forest schools, etc., and other programs. But clearly can survive together in the city environment. And just to finish, you can see that this moment where before the gates open, that the school really does belong part of this community and gives back itself as well as its use and potential for teaching and adult learning within that space. But it certainly feels it belongs to the community. And this is a very outward-looking school in this environment. So I'll just finish with a quick, a little video of getting an insight to how the people who actually use the space work. Thank you.
So we're standing in the courtyard in the middle of the school, and behind me you can see the apartment building. And the two things were part of an equation that made both possible. A school was never going to be able to purchase a piece of land of this size. And so here, the housing funds the school. So in a way, you've got two completely different types of buildings fused together in a hybrid.
The feedback when tenants first moved in was extremely overwhelming. People were just really, really happy and pleased because of how the development looks, the layout of the flats. It's a bold design. I mean, the red brick and the facade of it. It's very attractive to a lot of our tenants because of how it looks.
It's very definitely a landmark. It's a big building, but in a way there's a parity between inside and outside space. So rather than the balconies being these projecting elements, they're just part of this kind of pattern of openings.
The design very deliberately removed inner corridors to create this sense of visibility so that all the children feel a part of a community and they can see their friends and the other pupils going about their day.
It seemed quite natural to make a courtyard school, make a school which in a busy inner city location, in a way could just be a quiet kind of world in microcosm for little people.
It resonates with children playing, with the sound of singing, string instruments being played. It almost feels like a little village school, which is really magical.
Children can have their own space where they can feel calm and secure. There are spaces for them to be able to just sit, reflect, read a book, but then there are also spaces where they can run around. Some of our children do not have access to gardens at home. So for us, it's very important that all of our children are connected with nature. They're in classes where they can constantly look outside. They walk out of the classrooms and they're immediately out in the open.
One of the joys of not having corridors is we've got galleries and balconies and open staircases, and they're all places to play. Part of that constellation of spaces, outside every classroom there's a little bench, which allows us in a way to inhabit the wall. Part of it creates a reading space on the inside, part of it's pushed back and creates a bench on the outside. And we just imagine that as another place to play. It's a point in a child's life when they make friends, and as a parent, you make friends through your kids' friends. And so we just made a bench. And at the end of the day, parents sit on the bench, talk to each other. So The school is kind of working as a piece of social infrastructure other than just being a school.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Noel. That's a great scheme. I mean, it's really, it really speaks for itself. So I don't really think I need to kind of like go into huge detail about what really makes it work. Apart from the fact that I think what you've done there so well is turning kind of, an extremely tight site and the disadvantages incumbent with that to real advantage. And I think in doing that, you've kind of like played with, even something like a tiny school playground, which a lot of people, if it wasn't thought about properly, would actually be a real disadvantage for a school, has instead been turned into somewhere which I can kind of imagine very easily being, not just the idea that it would be a playground for you to kick a football around it, but actually something that accommodates neurodiversity in all its forms, whether you want to be on your own, play on your own, read a book, play with two other kids around the column, whatever. The idea that actually that space has not, and has been so thoroughly thought about, and also that it provides kind of art and drama and the idea of the cobweb. All of it are such beautiful, simple ideas that actually feed the imagination of children. And for that, I think it's a really, really laudable project, despite those limitations. I would like to ask you kind of bigger questions really about how on earth they managed to kind of pull a deal together like that in order to get a school onto that site, which is a whole other thing about kind of, enabling effectively and how much the architect was involved in that. But I realise I'm at 10:20 and people are asking questions. So one was, Les Morrison was asking, what about the costs in use? Are they efficient? From the design appears there's large surface to floor area ratios, but he does love the Corbusian feel of free flow spatial volumes and that it looks like a great learning environment.
So in terms of, we've been compiling that for the building was actually designed in 2015, right? So 2016, the beginning, we, as an energy center, it's now outdated. It's a CHP. It was BREEAM excellent, the best it could be at the time. But now in terms of maintenance, it's super well insulated at an air tightness of 3 meters per cube. And so it really does perform quite well relatively to the time it's been designed, and the shading and the kind of more low tech interventions of shading of devices, etc., and the well insulated, it is a heavier masonry building, and we would reassess that, of course, if we designed it today. But running costs the school have not suggested they're anywhere out of sorts. I would say we don't have all that data. It's quite a complicated mix in terms of its combination with the residential building and the share and energy centre and the different parties that run it. But that I think we can do a lot with the natural low tech design to mitigate those things.
Another question, Arsalna is asking, how is accessibility integrated into the project?
So all levels are fully accessible. There is a lift, its own lift to go to every level for staff and pupils who need that in the corner, quite an important moment in the corner of the courtyard. That brings up to all levels. The outdoor areas are flat, they're accessible, they're generous, they're wide. The decks included, classroom doors, etc., which can be left open and more inside and outside. So it's 100% fully accessible, including the entrance level in at the different levels on a very low grade courtyard.
And very quickly, I'm interested in how involved are you as architects at that very outset process of pulling that package together, really, in terms of how you could make it work as a viable site, get a school on there, get the accommodation on there. How much effort and, because obviously that's a very complex thing to do. You're effectively arranging site viability.
Yeah, we were involved from the outset because basically when the school bid for the site, they were completely outbid, and a residential, go through the history of it a bit, it fell away, and it could only work as a school with this partnership. And so a local, because we had done the secondary school and we knew the governors, they were keen that we were involved from the beginning to see, could we make it work? And there was lots of discussions with planners to see if the two elements would comply in their minds, but also the package, whether it would be viable. And so we were really on board with lots of permutations of lower rise residential wrapping around the school, sitting on top of a school more in all around. So lots and lots of experiments, but between the, a main contractor, between the developer, between the DFE, between the school governors, we were kind of, I would say, front and center to pull all these things together, finances aside, to show that it could work. And that happened from start to finish. And so the developer, the housing was instrumental, the DFE were instrumental. And it's quite a range of, with diverse kind of objectives and sometimes the polar opposites. That was a real challenge. But I think in the end, everyone seems it worked.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it's fantastic kind of coming together of stakeholders to produce something really like truly civic stuff. I love it. I mean, that bench just about embodies all of it. The idea that actually you give space back to the public realm and allow people to kind of use it as a community. It's a fantastic addition. Almost no value whatsoever, really, but actually the effect of it is enormous. Thank you very much indeed, Noel. Great project.
You're welcome.
Lovely, and we look forward to seeing your future works. I realise we're at 10:25. Sorry, everybody's running late. Apologies, Noel. Everything is running late for you as well. But 5 minutes, I think, and then we'll go back at 10:30 and we'll try and catch up a little, although knowing my previous performance, that's probably quite unlikely. But I'll see everybody in 5 minutes.
Thanks, Carlos. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've all managed to get your teas or go to the loo. Our next case study will be presented by Mark Dawson, who's Associate Director at Reiach and Hall Architects in Edinburgh. Mark joined Reiach and Hall in 2004 and has worked on a number of award-winning buildings across a variety of sectors: education, healthcare, research, and residential. Recent projects include the design and delivery of 3 campus buildings for Forth Valley College, including the new campus headquarters at Falkirk. All 3 buildings were nominated for the Reiach Doolan Award, with the Falkirk campus being shortlisted for the 2022 Sterling Prize. Mark has a keen interest in environmental design and was recently awarded an MSc in Advanced Sustainable Design and is also a certified passive house designer. Morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Hello. You're going to take us through your Forth Valley College, the Falkirk campus.
Yes, thanks very much for giving us the opportunity to take you through. So,
thank you for attending. Thank you.
No problem. The first part of the presentation is just a quick overview of the project, and then I'm going to try and go into some more detail towards the end of the presentation.
Great.
So, the Falkirk campus is the third of Forth Valley College's buildings that we've been involved with. It started off with Alloa in 2011 and the Stirling campus, which are all coalesced around the sort of the River Forth and the Forth Valley Basin. The Alloa campus, completed in 2011, they're all very distinctive and take their cues from the landscape. Most notably, the Ochil Hills are a very prominent part of this low-lying part of Scotland. So that the Ochils sort of feature large in all 3 campuses. Alloa's got a prominent hillside location, and Stirling sits in a low-lying bend in the River Forth, just outside of Stirling, with absolutely stunning views towards the Wallace Monument and Stirling Castle off to the north. All of the buildings sort of take a cue from each other in terms of the materiality and the sort of simple pared back Scandinavian influence, I guess, in terms of the interiors. The site at Falkirk that we were presented with is split in 2. So on the right-hand side, that's the site that we ended up building on. On the left-hand side is the existing campus, the existing Falkirk estate, which was developed in the 1960s and so a relatively fine building in its time, but had really come to the end of its life, riddled with asbestos, and had sort of developed into quite a big rambling campus. The site that we've got is on the periphery of Falkirk, but Falkirk itself is actually quite a small town, so it's still relatively straightforward in terms of its connections to the town. It's very walkable. The town's off to the west there, with Falkirk Stadium off to the east, and then the views towards the north and the Kelpies and the Ochil Hills, etc. Are sort of quite an expansive outlook. So we identified an opportunity at planning stage, which was the site in the centre there that's coloured red. All of our adjacent sites are effectively unbuilt. And once the existing campus to the left is vacated and given over to housing, there's an opportunity for us to connect the town via Victoria Park through our site, through the what would be the housing site, into the Helix Park, and create a sort of a really important green link to allow the people of Falkirk to actually make that transition to sort of greener spaces on the periphery of town. And in terms of the overall sizes, the Falkirk campus is the HQ. So Alloa specialises in business, Stirling's hospitality and creative industries, and Alloa is really STEM sciences because of its location adjacent to Grangemouth and the petrochemical industry nearby. And that's how it stacks itself up on site. We brought the building to the south of the site so that it had a presence. The main drag into Falkirk is at the bottom of the page there, from the M9. And in doing that, we engage the southern part of the building with the streetscape, but also provide masking to the relatively extensive car parking that came with the brief, and managed to mask it at the same time by arranging it to the north of the site. And then driving that green link through our site, so creating the first section of that green link in effect for others to link into as the sites develop either side of us. In terms of the ground floor plan, that's how it stacks up. So it's 3 main sections. As you can see, it sort of divides up relatively logically. So the southern aspects of the building are the public areas. So all of the functions that are to do with community, like the library, the sports spaces, the entrance, flexible learning spaces, all address themselves to the southern end of the site. And so we've maximised the glazing in this area to sort of create that sense of connection to the street and animate the facade, and so you can see the activities that are happening, facilitating that with the large precast cantilevered elements that provide solar shading. So in that part of the building, you've got things like hair and beauty salons that the public are encouraged to take part in and become welcome guinea pigs. Also sports provision, so the gyms are open to the community as well as teaching facilities. And we've also got our things like our dining spaces and all of the social spaces that are at the heart of the building. And then just slightly further up, the general teaching spaces. So on the very left-hand side, the darker orange stripe is the staff space, which arranges itself over 2 floors. And on the right-hand side, the darker stripe is the specialist teaching, with the general teaching finding its way in between. There's quite an interesting relationship between the staff spaces always being able to, the students are always able to find a member of staff. So the proximity to the places where people are taught and where the staff work, it was quite an important driver there to make sure that there's maximum connection. And that's really how that teaching block, if you like, expresses itself. So it's a handmade Danish brick, and the structure is clad with precast concrete, and the glazing in ribbon windows really to maximise natural light into all the spaces. And some of the teaching spaces that accrue from that. And then again, the workshop areas. So we've just all the dirty, messy, dusty things that workshops tend to be are all coalesced into this building. And we've given it a kind of industrial character using an anodized aluminium rain screen panel product that clads the workshop and gives it a separate identity. And you've got all the things that happen in workshops like welding and bricklaying and you name it happens here. As well as serving the petrochemical industry, it's the flexibility that we have to employ in the building to meet local industry needs is a key driver for the design of the building. And then dropping in the courtyard so that we've got access to daylight and natural ventilation. The majority of the building's naturally ventilated with a few areas being mixed mode. And then dropping those courtyards, giving the opportunity for breakout as well. And we're quite lucky to have quite a lot of mature landscape as well. So a lot of mature trees that we've managed to retain. We didn't have to take too many trees down to create the building. So we've got a ready-made landscape, if you like, that's bedding in quite well. And then in terms of the approach to the buildings, there's a main east-west concourse that brings you into the building, and a north-south student street. So just some shots of the approach into the building from the main entrance into a double height entrance space that opens up into kind of quite a voluminous, welcoming, open and airy space that's got light from all levels. On the ground floor there to the right, that's a flexible learning space. The glass partition there completely folds away and completely concealed and tucked away so that this can be used for a variety of different purposes. And actually the college used it for a vaccination centre. They had about 300,000 people over their 3 campuses. And the principal was absolutely delighted because it was, he said, the best open day that he's ever had. And then that north-south student street with breakout spaces. And creating those little nodes as you come down the street. So similar, the groupings of vertical circulation and stairs and lifts and toilets all have the same motif and aid with orientation. And also we're carving in openings into the floor plates to bring natural light down. It's a 2-story building, so bringing light into the plan is through top lit spaces is a kind of key motivating factor that we've got for the design. And then effectively borrowing circulation space and repurposing it as learning space so that there isn't really this a distinction between class and it's a relatively well-trodden path that the breakout and circulation, every part of the college really becomes a circulation space. And just finding these little moments, even areas under stairs where you've got a natural little eddy space that we can use for learning. And then in terms of making, the area that we're in is a sort of alluvial landscape that's an area just to the north of our site is called Skin Flats, and there's a sort of wonderful corruption of Schoen Flats, which apparently, as local tradition says, that the Dutch merchants came up and they were so taken by the beautiful low-lying landscape, it reminded them of home, but they called it Schoen Flats. But and we managed to corrupt it into something quite not quite so beautiful. But that alluvial landscape is brought through in all 3 buildings, and we quite like the idea of that handmade brick, that kind of sedimentary aspect being brought into the buildings. And so choosing a Peterson brick was a really fundamental decision, because we're not doing too much with the buildings. They're quite restrained facades, really. And that runs through into the structure as well, because the structural engineer described the site as a thin crust on top of 30 metres of soup. So that paler grey is the soup, and the piles strategy that we employed was an energy pile. So we got all of the heating, 100% of the heating and cooling requirements for the college come from geothermal energy through the piles themselves. It's a relatively straightforward structural solution that we've got, which is Pico Delta beam, which is effectively a precast concrete floor panel on a steel frame. But what that gives us is a sort of opportunity for really wide open plan spaces. So we maximise the opportunity for flexibility and adaptation and gain the benefit of thermal mass at the same time. But if we were being honest, we would probably, in today's day, similar to the project that Noel was describing, this was designed in 2016. And I think our thinking's come on a wee bit in terms of embodied carbon in particular. So CLT, we're doing a very similar thing in other projects where CLT's been considered as an alternative to the precast solution. So it is very standard kit of parts, really, in terms of a very commercial construction. It's the way that we've managed to drive the costs down on the project. We've probably got about £2,500 a square metre on this, which was pretty good. We've managed to enclose a lot of space and get quite a bit for it. So using an SFS in between that steel frame, cladding it, cramming it with insulation, and then covering it with even more insulation to get good fabric E values. And then just looking at some of the details, that's the precast pilaster in front of the columns that we've created at the same dimension as the handmade brick, just to keep a really fine detail between windows. And the parapet details probably quite interesting to look at. We've kept the parapet flush with the brickwork, but we've introduced this lead drip that throws water off at the head, just to sort of create this really sharp line at the top of the building, which is pretty successful. And we had this worry about this insulation here because we've got a parapet made of studs, and we were kind of concerned about whether that would be a thermal bridge. So we commissioned some thermal analysis of the roof as well. And what it showed was that actually the studs aren't the problem, but the steelwork is. So these are the columns coming through. So actually with the introduction of a little thermal break there, I think we could probably have taken that problem out of the way. And then in terms of the workshop construction, we've, again, as an expedient measure, we've used a structural panel, a rain screen panel that spans from bottom to top and doesn't need any other support. And on top of that, we've used the Norbull extruded anodized aluminium cladding as a rain screen element, and that's the rain spanning top to bottom with the horizontal rails before it gets clad. And then that's just a wee diagram showing how it all stacks up, how we've separated the thermal line from the structural line. And the block work on the inside is really because of the longevity and durability needed for the workshop activities on the inside to keep things from getting damaged. And then lastly, just in terms of the roof lights, we've obviously employed quite a lot of roof lights because it's a low-lying building. Bringing light down into the centre of the plan and animating circulation spaces was a key driver. So the sawtooth arrangement that you would have seen on some of those previous images, and just showing how that was constructed with the steel spanning completely across the space, and then covering with the decking, the plasterboard elements on the right, and then this really amazing kind of almost reminiscent of shipbuilding, which is quite appropriate before it receives the Valchromat cladding, which is a through-coloured MDF that's really hard wearing. We've used it on circulation spaces as well. And then the last diagram is the workshops, where we have a similar treatment, where we've brought natural light down into the workshop spaces, and we've used the fact that the cross-bracing steel elements create this kind of triangulated form in the workshops. And we've maximised on that by effectively using that space to bring these trapezoidal roof lights and top light down into the spaces. That's how some of those are shaping up in the workshop spaces. That's it, really. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Lovely presentation. I'm really kind of inspired by the interiors and the way that there's so much kind of modulation of even of the circulation spaces, which can be, in most cases are very prosaic, but the way that you kind of draw people through the space by kind of widening all the time. The space is always kind of widening out as you pass through it, or narrowing down.
Yeah.
And so kind of like creating that lovely modulation of space as you pass through. I'm intrigued by the just because you started with it, and I think that the notion of kind of civic quality, I think, which seems to kind of ride through an awful lot of your work, and the way that you talk about this kind of south entrance, which was obviously the way that you address from the city, but that perspective notion that you wanted to draw up of the idea of the crossing through from Victoria Park to is it the Helix space on the east? And I just wondered, how far could you as architects go down the road? Because I know that all of your kind of workshop spaces and everything are on that north side, and obviously it's the north side, so why would... But there's always that idea that you wanted to kind of create or encourage that idea of people moving across from one part to the other. And I just wondered whether you put serious thought at any point to kind of making that, in a sense, engage more with that, even though there's no engagement now, that there might be prospective future engagement with the public at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that we identified with the planning team quite early on in the project, and they really got behind that idea of creating this link piecemeal, bit by bit, as the sites come forward. So it's been written into the local development plan now. So that each of the sites, as they come forward, have to have this idea of connecting in to the sites adjacent in order to create a public thoroughfare through from the city right the way through to the Helix. So as it's sort of embedded in the policy, we're kind of hoping that it's got legs and it will happen. But that idea of openness, I think Sharon and Helen were talking about at the beginning of the webinar. The college is completely barrier-free, which is really unusual these days. So there's no turnstiles, there's no scanning, there's nothing. You can any member of the public is completely free just to come in, have a cup of coffee and a scone in the canteen, nip in, get their hair done. So use the library. The sports facilities can be used by everybody as well. So it's a properly inclusive thing.
Was that embedded from the outset, or did that need to be kind of put into the brief?
The client is very forward thinking in that respect. I mean, I guess a further education college is an awful lot more connected to its community in any case, because it serves its local community. It's not necessarily taking international students, although they do. They've got quite a lot of people that come from far and afield to learn some of the specialist things that they teach, but the curriculum is based on local need, and it responds directly to what local employers need. So they're always communicating, they're always talking with local business to see, what are your needs, how can we serve that, and also in terms of just the wider community. That whole COVID experience was an amazing thing for the college, because not only did it get young people through the door, but more importantly, it got their parents through the door and their grandparents. So they could see that there was this facility on their doorstep that was designed for them, and that would encourage people. There's quite often an off-putting nature to higher education or just further and higher education, where people maybe feel that it's not for them. And just by getting folk through the door, actually, and just letting them see that it was a kind of a very inclusive environment, I think was a great thing for the college.
Yeah, I think you embodied that as well in your City of Glasgow campus as well, where it was truly civic on like writ big. And I love the way that it both engaged with the street, kind of drawing people up with this kind of grand staircase, but also that idea that, it was a temple to learning, and it proudly kind of stated itself as such on the riverside. So I think that, I think it's great what Reiach and Hall does in terms of wanting to establish, the civic nature of architecture. And I think that's a really important thing for you to do as a firm, and you do it really well. Just a couple of questions. One was from Chris Jones saying, how deep are those piles to get through the soup? I think you said 35 metres, didn't you?
Yeah, they're between 30 and 40 metres. Yeah.
And Les Morrison was asking, were there any solar gain issues with the building? I'm assuming in Scotland that's probably not such a big deal, but maybe it is nowadays. You've been having some lovely spring weather.
It is. We learned quite a lot from the previous two projects. So actually where we're still having some issues is on the west facades. We've sort of solved it. Really, it needs shading. If I'm being brutally honest, the western facade needs some solar shading. We've solved it because it doesn't happen too often. I mean, in that heat wave that we had last summer, it was perfectly controllable by opening the windows, and we've got mixed mode ventilation with cooling cassettes in the ceiling that use the renewable cool from the ground. So in a way, it's kind of free, but it's not really. So we managed to keep comfort absolutely fine. So nobody's overheating, but actually probably the better way to do it would have been to have shaded it rather than on the few occasions when it is too hot, relying on the chill beams.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much indeed, Mark, for your candour and for showing us the project itself. It's fantastic. It was great to see it.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. We need to pass on now to our next sponsor presentation from Gary Ledger, UK Technical Director at Cornier. Gary is Cornier's UK Technical Director and leads development of high-performance aluminium facade products, an expert in designing and engineering innovative facade solutions. Gary's role involves overseeing technical aspects, working closely with engineers and architects to ensure their products offer performance, functionality, and exceptional aesthetics. He and his team have helped Cornier to create several bespoke products that feature in some of the UK's more iconic buildings, pushing boundaries of facade design. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning.
Your presentation today, Facades Optimise Without Compromise. Sounds like a real rallying call, that one.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, but yeah, we're hopefully going to highlight some value engineering opportunities through the design of the facade.
Look forward to it. Take it away.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for your attendance. As already introduced, my name is Gary Ledger. I'm the Technical Director for Cornier UK Limited. Our talk this morning is Facades Optimised Without Compromise. Essentially, how a best value approach can positively impact the project budget. We do have a couple of learning outcomes for today, hopefully. So to understand the core Cornier products suited to the education sector, to evaluate key design considerations that offer best value whilst maintaining performance, to ensure products are correctly specified through early stage engagement, and to consider the full life cycle and sustainability credentials of aluminium. So, a little bit about Cornier, first of all. We were established in 1906 in the USA by a Kansas-based architect known as Francis Plim. From those early beginnings, Cornier has grown to become a brand recognised by architects, specifiers and consultants all over the world. We are a leading facade system house and have had a presence in the UK for over 50 years. We design and manufacture highly engineered aluminium glazing system solutions. And we have a comprehensive portfolio of facade products, including curtain wall systems, windows, commercial entrance doors, and framing systems. Strong mechanical properties of aluminium, combined with our engineering expertise and design ingenuity, make our building systems the perfect solution for the education sector. From primary schools to universities, we've built up a well-established and successful track record in this sector. We're able to offer multiple areas of differentiation, including our range of high-performance and robust products that have been specifically developed to fulfill the technical and commercial requirements for a building envelope in the education sector. So whether you're looking for a cost-effective casement window or a robust entrance door, all the way up to a thermally efficient passive house solution, we have the right product choice and combination for your next education project. Apologise for that, it was a fire alarm. It's not a real one, thankfully. So, in the education sector, it's imperative to offer product solutions that combine performance, aesthetic, and best value. At Cornea, we're able to find the best solution for your project and budget due to our significant product portfolio, experience, and knowledge. The key to this, to all of this, is early stage engagement. And that can be directly with us. Through our architectural and technical support teams, we can assist with your building facade specification requirements by maximising performance and meeting every facade detail requirement while still offering best value. Over the next few slides, we'll look at some of these key considerations across 3 of the most popular education sector products. Let's start with the doors. And I've done this deliberately because doors are often left to the end of the decision-making process. And this is where problems can arise. Every door opening on your project needs to be assessed on its own merit. And the key takeaway is not to attempt a catch-all approach. Doors need to be specified based on function. They could be panic release doors, security doors, high traffic main entrance doors, storerooms, stockroom doors, etc. Need to be assessed for the frequency of use, otherwise known as the category of duty, and also encompassing security, safety, exposure to the elements, just to name but a few. What's on screen isn't an exhaustive list, as we don't want to give all of our secrets away, but it's a very good starting point to discuss some of the options available. We'll pick out a couple of these key points. So, specifically main entrance doors in schools are subject to a significant amount of traffic and potential abuse. So consider specifying a prefabricated, fully welded door for superior strength. Ensuring you get the correct hardware specified is absolutely key. And we know ourselves there is a myriad of hardware options available, and that's where our teams are in place to guide you through that specification. There's a few other tips on there which we don't need to go through. I'll move on to the next slide. Windows, although their external and internal appearance can look the same, the frequency and type of opening lights or vents, as they're known, the hardware choice, and the way they are configured to fit the building can have a big effect on their cost. Additionally, ancillary products such as solar shading need careful consideration, as these may result in larger window frame profiles being required to carry the additional structural loads, obviously coming from the brise-soleil product. So some key design considerations for the windows. First of all, minimize the number of vents. as this will minimise cost. And we've got some examples coming up in a short while which show you some vent options. Check the wind load, the design wind load, and make sure you're selecting profiles that are designed to perform to suit the requirements. So there are many different window profiles in terms of width and depth that you can choose from, but really they are there to be selected based on the size and weight of the vent and the exposure to the wind load. One that we come across all the time is to challenge the need for security on the project. Things like secure by design are all-encompassing schemes where it's not just the glazing system that's assessed for its security level, it's the whole site. So in a site that is fairly secure, and where obviously you will be looking at security products for the ground floor, if there is no accessibility on first floor and floors above that, then quite likely you do not need a security related product. Security windows have additional locking points and additional hardware which gives them the ability to perform that security function, but obviously they are not required if the windows are not accessible. Review alternative methods for achieving natural ventilation. So again, we'll show you some examples of that in the upcoming slides. Use improved G-value glazing to deliver solar shading, as this can be more cost effective when comparing it to Brise-Soleil. And the third product range, in conjunction with the doors and windows, are the curtain wall systems. Curtain wall really is designed for multi-story applications. So it's quite common to see that in education facilities such as large main entrances and where floors span more than ground and first floor. Again, when you look at a curtain wall system, these back boxes, which are known as the mullions vertically and the transoms horizontally, the depth of that box is directly proportional to its strength under wind load, barrier load, etc., and its ability to carry glass weight. We use zoning of wind loads to calculate specific box sizes as you move around a building. So if you've got an application where you're doing a full curtain wall wrap or a full curtain wall to a complete elevation, the wind load will vary across that elevation. It'll be higher at the corners and lower as you get towards the center of the screen. So by harnessing the specific back box that's required, by looking at reinforcing profiles just in the areas they need to be reinforced, you can actually bring about not just a cost saving, but you're using less aluminium. Another feature is to look for a zone drained system. I'm getting a little bit technical now, but there are essentially two types of curtain wall system. You've got the zone drain system and you've got the mullion drain system. The zone drain system allows you to minimize wastage because you can use the same profile for the horizontal members as you do for the vertical members. With a mullion drain system, these profiles are different. Look at optimizing your bar length. So, like any glazing system manufacturer, Cornea will supply standard stock length of material. But if you're not careful with the optimization, you can end up with a lot of unnecessary waste if it's not thought about and if the question is not asked about specific stock lengths. For simple ground floor applications, you don't need a curtain wall system. Cornea offer framing systems which are thermally broken. They have the same sight line as the curtain wall system, and they are a much more cost-effective solution for glazing areas at ground floor level and incorporating doors. So we're going to look at the products available now within the Cornea range. And back to the doors and the most specified product in our range for education. The AA190 TB thermally broken severe duty welded door is our market leading entrance door. It's an all-purpose entrance door, ideal for use in high traffic areas, automatic entrances, etc. The key to its design is its welded corner construction. It is the strongest aluminium door available on the market. Each corner is separately welded 4 times to give it exceptional strength and allow the door to resist the rigours of constant use. It also allows it to achieve the severe duty category performance requirements of BS 6375 Part 2. Quality is assured through this product. This is a product that we still manufacture at our site, our manufacturing site in Runcorn. So we don't just design products, we manufacture them as well. Capable of some enormous sizes, 3 meters tall. The profiles are thermally broken, allowing it to achieve U-value performance as low as 1.8 watts per meter squared Kelvin. It can offer water tightness, air tightness, up to 42 mil of glazing infill, and has fully rebated designs and various threshold options, including those for accessibility requirements. It's independently tested to pass 24 for security, and it also offers a child-friendly finger guard pivot style. So this is the design of the profile. It's not a third-party device that's attached to the outside of the door to give the finger guard protection. Available in single doors, double doors, auto swing and biparting doors. There's a full design flexibility. And with it being thermally broken, it's now available in single and dual colour, different colours inside to out. Worth pointing out on the U-value performance, obviously we went through some changes last year in terms of document L. So you will notice that high use entrance doors have gone down to a thermal performance, a UW of 3, previously from 3.5, and that's set to drop again in 2025. But the AA190 door will give you that future proofing already. In terms of the windows, the becoming the most popular is our latest product, which is our 720 SL window system. It's been designed specifically for the education sector. It offers excellent thermal performance, safety and security, and a best value approach to the education sector to ensure projects remain on budget. We've engaged with some tier 1 main contractors to ensure the configurations available fit some of the modular approaches being taken for some developments. And there are a few technical features within the window which make it faster to fabricate, make it easier to assemble and install. It also offers ultra slim 62mm sight lines that vent and frame, which enhances the glazing vision area, so we have better external views and maximise on natural daylighting. As you would expect, it's fully tested to all of the weather performance requirements and security, capable of some large sizes, triple glazing, and it also suites in with the other products. So you can fit this seamlessly into the curtain wall system and into the framing system. Lots of different hardware options. There's trickle ventilation available. We've packed a lot in to a very, very efficient product, both in terms of cost and its performance as well. In terms of curtain wall, again, you'll see numbers of different systems within the cornea range, from stick curtain wall systems all the way up to unitized. But the AA100 is and remains our #1 curtain wall product for the education market, primarily due to its very slim sight lines. It's only 50 millimeters on the sight line. But thermally, it will give you options all the way up to passive house certification. As well as that, it's fully tested to the most severe weather test requirements in Europe, which is the CWCT Sequence B test. Again, the most popular choice is the zone drained option because of the ability to optimize the profiles. It's a fully pressure equalized system, and all of the drainage is concealed either behind the horizontal or vertical base cap. So there are a number of different front ends you can look at on the system. So on screen is the traditional, what we call a pressure plate, and either a powder coated or an anodized base cap. But we can offer horizontal cap, vertical cap, full SSG structural silicon glazed. There's a fire resistant version of the system, which is the system. So it is the AA100 system. So you can seamlessly integrate areas that require fire resistance with areas that don't. So how do we differentiate? How do we offer best value? Well, as previously mentioned, early stage engagement is key. We're going to look here at a window configuration used many times over the years on education projects and compare it to some of the other configurations and products that we offer in our range. You'll see that this window comprises of 3 opening vents, 1 fixed light at the top, and a large vision window to the side. And we've given this a price index of 1. This is the window we're going to compare the others with. It comes out with a U value of 1.5 when using a centre pane U value glass of 1 with a warm edge spacer. And typically, through the 3 of these vents being open, this is the ventilation figure that you will get on the right hand side. The idea of this system is that you can open the bottom vent to allow cool, fresh air into the building, and the upper vents, the top one is opened to exhale the stale CO2 loaded air, and the middle one can be additionally opened to give purge ventilation in the warmer months. We're going to compare this 720 system with 4 others. So the 720E, the 720 parallel opening vent, the lighter weight system, the 540, and the vertical sliding sash window system. As already mentioned, our architectural and technical support teams are on hand to guide you through this and look at potential options which you previously may not have considered. I should point out that all of the windows on this page are limited to 100 millimeters, which is what we do as standard for education facilities. So, if we look at the first window, we'll see that the price index is at 0.7 based on the previous window. Primarily, this is because you're replacing 3 vents with 1. It also offers a better U value, but it's slightly down on the airflow. The next window system is the parallel opening vent. So rather than the window pivoting out from the top or from the side, which is the traditional way of doing things in the UK, this vent opens in a parallel manner to the surrounding frame. The whole vent pushes outwards and you get ventilation around all 4 sides. whilst this window is more expensive than this window, it's still cheaper than the previous example with the 3 vents. It offers a much better U value and a much increased ventilation or free air figure. The 540 system, again, brings about a more cost-effective solution. This is comparable to the 720 SL. It gives a better U value than the previous window example, but again, the airflow is slightly down. But when you look at these side-hung vents, even these are providing benefits. The previous window contained 3 vents. This only contains 1. The sliding sash window is more of an older design, and as you can see, it's got a higher cost and it doesn't perform as well in terms of the U value or the airflow. So we look at all of these aspects to try and deliver best value on the project, and there's some examples as I run through here now. With comments we've received back and case studies that you can look at on the website. All offering very, very different aesthetics, but all achieving the requirements of the thermal performance, the ventilation, security, and others. In terms of sustainability, I'll quickly just add that Cornea is one of only a few aluminium suppliers that have secured BAS 6001 for responsible sourcing. We have life cycle assessment for our main products, including the EPDs. And sustainability is not just about the products themselves. So in terms of our manufacturing site, we are reducing our environmental impact all the time, which then feeds in to the life cycle assessment and the environmental product declarations.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Okay.
Sorry, that was absolutely curiously forensic. It was like almost like there was actually a design there where we were actually going through all the options. I think what I came away from it, I mean, just to be quick, is just from observational experience, is one thing about, you were talking about the window designs, and what I think is quite problematic, and I think architects need to look at, is positions of handles. I've been to schools where positions of handles have been centrally placed in order for ventilation, but then schools end up sticking tables in front of it. So the reality of the situation is you can't get to the handle because the handle actually needs to be lower down on the frame. And I believe there's something about regulation that means you can't take the handle further down the frame in order to make it more accessible if you've got a table in front of the window. Is that true or not?
Not necessarily. So there are standards which require and give limits for reach in terms of where you can position the handle, both accessing it from inside the building, you know, reaching up or reaching across a table, but also reach when the window is open. So there are limits on how far you can reach out of that window to close it again, particularly on purge ventilation.
Yeah.
We've developed solutions with handles at the bottom, primarily for accessibility requirements. People have limited mobility. So there really is no limit. It's all about talking to us.
Yeah, I was going to say that the second point, actually, specifically a passive house education building where it was for accessibility, so people in wheelchairs could actually use it. It was a kitchen vent window. Same thing. It was a tilt and turn, very nice view, very large, but I think architects need to be mindful. These things are quite substantial pieces of metal, and actually even having a low-level tilt and turn can be quite an effort to open and close them. So I would just kind of like close on that particular aspect, because I think architects really need to be mindful when they're speaking with designers and suppliers such as yourselves about handle positions and who's using it, and how much effort it's going to take to open and close those windows, I think is my takeaway from that particular thing.
Couldn't agree more.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Gary. Pleasure talking.
Pleasure.
And sorry, we need to move on quickly to Tim Allen Booth, who is going to be presenting on the new library at Cambridge University at Magdalene College. Tim is an associate at Niall McLaughlin Architects and has 25 years of experience in architecture. Since joining the practice in 2006, he's led many of our higher education projects, and is also involved in the practice's legal and risk managing workshop groups. He previously worked at Avanti Architects on healthcare and education, and for development workshops in Kosovo on a post-war housing reconstruction. You're talking about the new library, obviously Sterling Prize winning, Tim. We went to see it together. I can actually vouch that the power seat that he may well talk about is absolutely definitively a power seat. Are you there, Tim?
I am here. Yes.
Good morning. So running late.
Morning, Carlos.
Thank you very much indeed. And I look forward to your presentation. Lovely building.
Thanks for inviting me to speak this morning. It's been a really interesting morning.
Pleasure.
Hope you can see my presentation. So I'm going to talk this morning about a project that we worked on for a long time. And we were invited in 2014 to take part in a competition for a new library, archive and gallery for Magdalene College in Cambridge. And here you see it across the trees in the garden setting of the college. This is a 15th century map of Cambridge, and you can see the colleges are kind of hatched in black, and you can see the kind of quadrangular arrangement of the colleges. And the interesting thing about Magdalene is that in its position in Cambridge is it's outside of the city centre and beyond the River Cam, and you can see it in the sort of top right of this image. And legend has it that the Benedictine monks who set up the college placed the college outside of the city boundaries to provide a kind of seclusion for the monks and to keep them away from the temptations of the town. And the college developed around two principal courts, which you see in this aerial photograph from before we built the building. The first comes directly off Magdalene Street, close to the bridge, to Magdalene Bridge. And then a second beyond that, as you make your way through the college to a garden space that leads down to the river. And that garden was originally a kind of kitchen garden for the college. And it still remains kind of mostly garden space today. An amazing setting. So arriving through the through an arched doorway at the Porter's Lodge, you arrive into the image on the left here of this enclosed space of First Court, enclosed by this kind of amazing wall of brick, which has been patched and repaired over the years, with these windows set in stone tracery set within it. And then moving through that space and that archway ahead of us there, you arrive in the image on the right, in front of what's called the PIP's building, which is a kind of curious mashup of neoclassical architecture with a kind of medieval building. It seems a kind of neoclassical face was put on an earlier building partway through its construction. And anyway, it's grade 1 listed, and that's where the library was before we built the new building, and still contains Samuel Pepys' library on the upper floor. So then moving through that court, and you turn on the sort of left side of the Pepys building, you arrive into this space, which is the Fellows Garden, that open garden space leading down to the river. That's the back of the Pepys building. You can see how different it looks there. On the left-hand side of the image. And in the middle of that image is where the new library was to be placed, in the corner of the garden, sort of nestled amongst the trees. So this plan just sets out that arrangement, and you can see the two courts, First Court and Second Court, and then this open-sided court, which we've made, where the new library sits alongside the existing Pepys library building, looking into the Fellows Garden. So it's the interesting thing about the main kind of purpose of a library in kind of this digital age we live in now. The college had a very good brief written by Cambridge Architectural Research And one of the things they set out in that brief was this issue. And their idea of the library was that it was a space in which the students could put aside the distractions of home life and focus on their studies. And that sort of put us in mind, again, of monks, of this kind of monastic seclusion. And we thought of this painting by the Renaissance artist Antonello de Messina, which shows St. Jerome, the scholar monk, seated in his study in this amazing kind of timber architecture that's then set within a masonry frame. And the painting places the scholar and the book right at the center of the page. But at the same time, it gives you these images out towards a kind of verdant landscapes beyond the framing of the building. And we use this kind of idea, this image, as a sort of a touch point for the design of the new library. So our design process kind of began from first principles, the focus on the scholar again, looking at the very basic thing of the size of a desk. We were actually given a desk size in the brief, and so we tested that a bit as we built up our brief. And one of the things about the brief was that the college they'd said that they wanted a variety of spaces, but they wanted to have a basic mix of 50% of the 100 reading spaces on shared tables and 50% on individual desks. And so as we began to think about setting out the library, we thought of this idea of a reading room for 4 to 6 people as the kind of basic building block of our plan. And we tested the dimensions of this space to give the right kind of intimacy and room to move around. And we made this space, which is 4.7 meters square. And it contains a central shared reading table. And then around the perimeter, we've got a zone for bookshelving, because another aspect of the scheme that we wanted to promote was the idea that you would always feel amongst books, and that the library would be a space in which you could wander and look for a book on the shelf that you may not have decided you were going to read in the first place. And so we'll have a kind of wandering aspect to it. And so this reading room is our, as I say, basic building block of the plan. And then we started to think about how we would aggregate that form into a larger plan arrangement. And the colleges had a survey done of their students, and the students had said they wanted all sorts of different things in their library. And the idea of variety seemed to be important. And we thought that this a kind of inclusive way of making the library would be to allow different types of places to sit and study within it, rather than just a collection of tables and a collection of books in sort of set apart from each other. And so I think Hertzberger was mentioned in an earlier part of this morning's session. We were fascinated by the plan of the central Behir on the left there, and Lucan's plans, which have this kind of oscillation of major and minor components within the plan, and that formulation, a sort of tartan grid that they have, allows you to read the particle of the room within the plan, and at the same time to generate a kind of richness. And so this is our version of that kind of plan form. The beige spaces are those square reading rooms. With the grey elements are double-sided bookcases, or sometimes external walls as well. And then setting these square spaces apart, there are a grid of passageways in white, which run in 2 directions. And so that allows you to get around the rooms without necessarily having to go into them. And it also generates a lot of surface area to put bookshelves onto. There's well over 1 kilometre of shelving in this building. And then the green points where the passageways cross, there's a slightly bigger space for passing, and they're kind of node points within our plan, our tartan grid. And this, we hope that our plan form would have some of the richness of Soane's section here, where you get the kind of oscillation of major and minor spaces. And we had a similar issue with trying to get light down into the center of the plan. So we too have roof lighting to bring the light down. And these roof lights, which you see in this image, are made of 2 pitched roofs crossing at 90 degrees, with 4 glazed triangular gables bringing light down. And then the passageway dimension in our plan form sets apart these roof lanterns, so the light gets in between. And at the corners of these lanterns, the weight of the lantern is brought down on a brick pier, and these piers travel all the way up through the building, picking up the loads of each of the floors. It's a 3-story building. and then the roof construction sitting on top. And working with the engineers, Smith and Warwick, we developed this idea of a kind of a three-dimensional lattice where the floor beams pass through a collection of brick piers, which are in these L-shaped brick piers, which go all the way through the building vertically, and the beams passing through them, landing on lintels. So you get a kind of crossing of structure, which occurs at each of these crossing points on the plan. And it creates this kind of knot, which we call the hashtag, where you see the timber laminated beams resting on the precast concrete lintels, which are then built into the brick piers. And these node points where we bring down the load, they also allow us to take out hot air as part of the natural ventilation strategy. So there's a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week access library space, and the majority of that time the building is unstaffed. So the users of the library, the students, have to operate it themselves, and they have to make themselves feel comfortable. And Max Ford and the engineers we're working with said to the college that a good way of doing that, of achieving a sense of thermal comfort, which is a relative thing rather than necessarily objective thing, is to allow users to adapt their environment. And so what happens is you get openings in the facades. They can be opened and operated by users to control the amount of cool air coming in. And then an automated system operated by the BMS allows hot air out through vents at the top, which is a combination of chimneys and vents in the pitched roof construction. And that idea of a naturally ventilated building is quite a bold one in some ways for a college, because the temperature follows the external temperature, and so you don't get a consistent 21 degrees all year round, but it's also a more sustainable solution, and it gives you this idea that you can control your own environment. And it has some wonderful benefits, like being able to open a window and hear the birds singing, and it gives us this great array of chimneys and lanterns up at roof level. And this is kind of proof of the pudding. This is the heat wave of last summer, when the outside temperature hit 40 degrees. You can see our internal temperature. The purple line is the top floor of the building. The blue line is the outside temperature, and the red line is the ground floor of the building and the ground floor reading room. So we're still managing to get most of 10 degrees off the peak external temperature on our top floor, with very substantial amounts of glazing. So the building seems to work fairly well from that respect. This is the ground floor plan of the building. So most of the library is on the upper 2 floors of the building, and that was a long conversation with the client about how we would connect the librarian's office on the ground floor and that entrance to the library with the upper 2 floors of the building. Also on this floor, we have a long gallery space and an archive facility. And this idea of connectivity, we came up with this idea of a diagonal movement through the building, both in section here and in plan. And that movement links together 3 major spaces within the building, 3 larger reading rooms carved out of our grid. And it takes you from the ground floor right up towards the top floor and the view overlooking the garden out toward the river. And so what we get is a triple height reading room at the entrance to the library. In the center of the section, a double height reading room with top lit space. And then on the right-hand side of the section, you get a single-story space up in the attic looking out towards the river. This is the second floor plan, and this arrangement of 3-2-1 kind of inverts itself in plan, and so the triple height space is 1 bay in plan, and the double height space is 2 bays, and the long reading room is 3 on the east-facing facade. These are the spaces. This is the triple height. And then we come off a stair at the back of that space, and we go up and arrive on the first floor, looking down the length of the central double height reading room with long tables down the middle. And then this is our top floor reading room looking out towards the garden. And on the outside, the college was very concerned about how we would settle this new building within a space which had never been built on in the entire history of the college. And would be a significant new addition on their site. And so we talked about making a building which was made out of a suite of elements that you would find on their existing buildings. And we showed them these photographs of Elizabethan and prodigy houses. The one on the top is Moynes Hall in Essex. And it's made of this combination of bay windows, pitched roofs with gables and chimneys, and they have a kind of rhythm in the way they're deployed. And we said we would do something similar with the new library. And so this is our version of that. And clearly it's a brick building. Most of the existing college buildings are brick, and they have this amazing tapestry-like quality of making and remaking over the years. And the brick tends to be sort of the reddish end of the color spectrum, but with a very large, thick mortar joint, which has quite an impact on the overall appearance. And so we tried to find a way of making brickwork which has similar quality. And this is our version of it. So very thick mortar joints, flush pointed. The mortar joints are 15 millimeters thick rather than 10. And we've used quite a crumbly looking brick, which is slightly smaller than a standard size of brick in 4 different colors. And they're handmade bricks made up in York by York Handmade, thrown into these timber molds before firing. An amazing manual process. And as part of that, we needed a large number of specials for bonding and detailing. So this drawing here shows all the different specials, which there's one for every letter of the alphabet. And the brick manufacturers stamped the letters onto our bricks. And I think pretty much every brick in the building has been drawn, laid out in elevations and plans showing the bricklayers how to put it all together, a sort of giant jigsaw piece of specials and non-specials. Amazing achievement by the bricklayers. So the bricks, the piers I talked about, they're load-bearing construction. They hold up the building. They have some reinforcement for tension in them. But also it's brick substantially on the outside. The external walls are load-bearing as well. And set into these walls, we have openings with timber windows and timber bays. The idea of making a window which is a space in itself and can be occupied, something that's interested us as a practice. The image on the left is of a house we did in Wandsworth a long time ago. In the middle, that's Cairns Escherich House. It's a reference for a lot of our windows. That idea of a kind of central space with a fixed window and a flanking shutter on either side that you can operate so that the space of the window can be enjoyed without a draft. And our bay windows are made of 3 components. At the ground floor, there's a French window illuminating the long gallery space on the left here, that image. In the center, on the first floor, you get a small enclosed reading room, the fixed window and the 2 flanking shutters, borrowed from Cairns building. And then on the top floor, you get the long reading room, which has a larger bay window. And that's how it looks on the outside. You see the stacking of those 3 components. And the timber bay is sort of almost, Gary was talking earlier about curtain walling. This is sort of timber curtain walling. This is oak glulam framing on site awaiting installation. And then set into that are bespoke oak windows, which we designed with a specialist joiner. And this is some of the mock-ups and testing, checking on performance. It's quite an involved piece of bespoke design. This is how they look on the inside. This is the west-facing bay window into the master's garden. And the idea for the materiality of the interior really was that there was a 3-dimensional lattice made of 3 principal elements: the vertical brickwork, horizontal spanning timber floor construction, which is made of spruce, glulam, and CLT, and then oak joinery. And so there are no finishes applied. It's all what you see are those 3 elements on the inside. And the glulam and CLT, then a very important part of that. A lot of time we spent getting the quality of that right, working with specialists, the engineer, and the Urban, who did the CLT, and Noel Holzbauer, who did the glulam. They're a Swiss company we've worked with in the past. This is the engineer's layout showing the glulam beams and the CLT slabs. And it's an engineered product. Obviously, The glulam is the highest grade that you can get structurally, so that the beams can span without steel flitches within them. This is Hannah's from Urban on the left there, doing a fairly uncomfortable snagging process. It's also quite a kind of low-tech construction technique in some respects, all held together with enormous screws. And it arrives flat pack on site. These are the roof lanterns in pieces, and they were made on the ground, which just sped up the process a bit, allowed us to apply the vapor control layer of the roof construction to them, and then they were lifted onto the building in one piece and dropped onto the top of our brick piers. As you can imagine, there's some tolerance in a brick pier of 3 stories high. So there was a bit of jiggling to get the lanterns to sit nicely on top of them when they got to the top. And then there's a real challenge for the joiners who had to then produce all the linings to get these kind of soaring verticals and everything to line up nicely. And these guys who built these, the linings of the soffit of the building, which is the principal area of acoustic absorption within the library. It's an open plan library, and obviously the right kind of fairly hushed acoustic is an important part of it. So the whole roof is lined with acoustic insulation covered in fabric, and then these oak slats applied over the top of it, which has to be hand cut. It's quite a process to get that to work and to get everything, all these joints lining up nicely at the corners you can see on the right. And so that's what we end up with on the inside, with the roof lantern on 4, like illuminating those spaces on 4 sides, this acoustic lining to the ceiling, and then all the joinery set within on those surrounding walls. And I'll leave you with the last space, which Carl's referred to, the best seat in the house, overlooking the 3-story void. We just had a bit of fun with the plan here and finding a location for the sort of most ostentatious seat possible. This is actually Neil's daughter reading a book there. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. I mean, I can't really, I mean, it's a shame. It's actually, probably said it when we were talking about a building when it won the prize. It's a shame that, you know, not being a public building, that you can't actually go in and see just how satisfying a space it is to walk through and no doubt to study in. And if anybody has the opportunity to be able to go to Magdalene and take a look, if they are doing a tours of it, it's well worth it. I think what's interesting about it is the fact that you've kind of taken that very simple central Behair kind of idea. Like you almost look at it in plan as if it's some form of kind of microprocessor in a way, just these repeating elements. But the complexity that you get, the volumetric complexity you get as you walk through the building, and you don't really get it from the plan. You don't really get it from the section, to be honest, even though the section kind of intimates it. It really is one of those buildings that you have to walk through in order to get how subtle those movements are, those kind of changes in spaces are and views through. I don't know whether you were aware of that when you, I suppose I'd like to think you did a lot of physical modelling of it, because I think that's the only way you'd really kind of get an idea of what it really feels like, to maybe even more so than a computer model.
It's surprising, you might be surprised to know, the only model we made, physical model we made of this building is this. It fits in a matchbox, and it's just a little massing study of the 12 lanterns and the chimneys. This was an interesting project for us because we had previously always just made physical models and done drawings, and this, I mean, it was 2014. This is the first project, or one of our first projects, in which we really started to use 3D modeling to explore the design. And actually, the college really needed to see images of the spaces in order to know whether what we were showing was correct. And so we fairly quickly found that actually we could have a better dialogue with them if we made a fairly convincing visual representation and presented that to them rather than physical stuff. So yeah, it's nearly all just done in the computer.
Okay, I find that hard to believe, actually, because it's just such a kind of complex space when you walk through it, ostensibly from something so simple. We have a question here from Maria Yutani Yakovides. Good God, she's asking if you could have done the wall construction with MMC.
So we did actually look at that. And there are some distinct disadvantages to building in the traditional manner of putting up brick walls and then putting timber across horizontally, because it's slow. One of the main reasons we didn't was we liked the idea of building these brick piers which would support the construction and then laying the timber across. And we looked at it for the outside envelope primarily, and it gives you this problem of differential movement. You can't have kind of some vertical brickwork and some vertical timber, and so we'd have had to change that whole idea of brick piers which support the chimneys and then the horizontal spanning structure if we'd then had an external envelope which was because the external envelope is also load bearing, if the external envelope was made of a different material, and so that made that not possible.
It really is. I mean, just in such a very, very crafted building. I mean, that idea you show the original axonometric, where you've got layers, kind of one, the brick going on top of the beams, which then off which come the timber beams. It's and the roof lights themselves. That level of craft is kind of evident all the way throughout, and it's nice for you to kind of acknowledge all the people that helped in the construction of that building, which I'm sure you kind of like passed it off as it required a bit of jiggling or whatever, but I imagine that the level of skill that was required there was quite something from the people that built it.
I think we were extraordinarily lucky with the contractor. We'd actually worked with them previously at a building we'd done for Jesus College, and we knew that they were, although this was a design build project, the contractor, Coxedge, that we worked with, they really approached it like a traditional building contract, and they said, you tell us what we're to build and we'll build it. We didn't spend long periods debating different ways of making stuff. They were happy to kind of say, well, you're the experts in designing things, you design it, and then we'll build it. And that's how we work together. And it worked extremely well. And but they did an amazing job of managing to build this building through the pandemic, of course. And it's really a testament to their skill, because building buildings with exposed structure where you can't conceal all your early mistakes and the mess of building sites it's a kind of a level of skill and expertise which not many contractors, I think, have.
Yeah, it was an amazing kind of meeting of minds and will, it strikes me, from looking at that building, wandering around it. Thank you very much indeed for that presentation, Tim. It's a lovely building and well worth to see if any of you can get out to see it. I need to round up now. I hope you've all got some inspiration from the various education projects that you've been looking at. I know that in the 5 minutes we had in the break that we were all talking about, I don't know, it's just a very engaged conversation about education. I think it's something that we all hold very dear, the idea that not only our education, but the education of those who come after us, especially as designers, is that we facilitate it as much as possible. So I would like to thank all our speakers. That's the Learning Crowd's Dr. Sharon Wright and Scott Brownrigg's Helen Taylor, Henley Halebrow's Noel Cash, Mark Dawson of Reiach and Hall, and of course Tim Allen Booth, you've just spoken to, of Niall McLaughlin Architects. And I'd also like to thank our two webinar sponsors, Oscar Acoustics, Ben Hancock, and Gary Ledger of Cornea. Please join us for our next PIP Offices webinar, the details of which I imagine will be coming into your inboxes at some point in the future, in the near future. And it just leaves me to thank you all very much indeed for spending your time with us today. I realise it's 11:53 now, which does not look good on me. So if I was getting a report, I'd imagine I'd probably get 9 out of 10, hopefully, for enthusiasm, and 2 out of 10 for timekeeping. I look forward to seeing you all at our next PIP webinar. Thank you very much indeed.